pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bow your head in a moment of reverence. God of shelter, give refuge to those who suffer violence and abuse in unsafe homes. Bring your peace. God of deliverance, release those who are enslaved and controlled by abusers and give them sanctuary. Bring your freedom. God of compassion, defend the abused and the innocents who witness violence. Bring your hope. God of salvation, surround, guide, and heal those who abuse and bully others. Bring your light. God of perfect love, move us towards holiness in our relationships with you, with one another, and with creation. Bring your assurance. God of shelter and peace, deliverance and freedom, compassion and hope, salvation and light, perfect love and assurance, hear our prayer. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Denise, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Shaw.
Here.
Gulick.
Here.
Neese.
Here.
Owen.
Here.
Joy.
Present.
Kennedy.
Here.
Assman Leiter.
Here.
Tidswell.
Here.
Boyette.
Here.
Repsis.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Council, we've got two sets of minutes on our agenda tonight, March 25th and April 8th. Are there any changes or motion concerning one or both? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we approve the minutes for March 25th, 24, and April 8th, 2024 as read.
Motion by Councilmember Boyette, second by Councilmember Neese. Are there any changes or discussion before we proceed to a vote? Seeing none, if in favor of the motions just for approval, both sets of minutes, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Council courtesies tonight. Councilmember Ripsis, I know you had a courtesy.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As I've done for the last couple of years, I wanted to take a few minutes tonight and just recognize some of our younger citizens here in Billings. Valley Federal Credit Union sponsors an event called The Hive, which is essentially a Shark Tank-like competition for high school students, bringing forward business ideas and connecting them and in some cases giving them strong funding for their ideas. So I wanted to introduce Brandon Scala and have him come up, tell us more about The Hive and introduce some of the students he's brought along with him this evening.
Mayor and Council, thank you. So yeah, this is the third year we've put on the Hive project. It is a Shark Tank-ish event where Valley and Northern Hotel is also a huge sponsor. We pony up a pretty good amount of money. The winner gets $5,000, second place gets $1,500, third place gets $1,000 to invest or infuse into the business of the student. We've had some great success, and every year has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And this year we've even actually got the attention of a private equity firm that is going to talk with one of the kids. So it's been great. They're here. I'd like to have them like 15 seconds come up and tell you who they are and kind of what their business is real quick. And so come on up. You guys all come on up. Just tell them who you are and like what you did and your business.
Hello, my name is Noah Eichel. I am the owner of the Arc of Billings, where since I was 11, I have been able to honorably supply my consumers with pet treats, which include dogs, cats, and birds.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I'm the owner of Beatrice Mexican Sweets, and I specialize in making Mexican baked goods and...
Hi, I'm Aubrey, and
I'm Caden.
And we made a business called A&K's Terrariums, where we make a point to make plants more accessible for everyone by putting them in terrariums, which makes it easier to take care of them. Our business model is to kind of try and make plants accessible to everyone, even without a green thumb. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
So Noah, the first gentleman, he was the one that won it. He got $5,000, and Miss Julia, she was third place. And then the AK Terrarium kids were the most memorable business, and they got $500 for that. So it was a great event.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you to all the sponsors. Great event. Any other council courtesies this evening, council members? Okay, we'll move on then to our proclamations. We do have a number of proclamations this evening, beginning with Arbor Day. In 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, and produce life-giving oxygen and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of Billings, Montana, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 26, 2024, as Arbor Day in the city of Billings, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and to urge all to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Next is Volunteer Recognition Month. Whereas the city of Billings recognizes the invaluable contributions of volunteers to the well-being and prosperity of our community. And whereas volunteers dedicate their time, talent, and resources to various organizations and causes, selflessly working towards the betterment of Billings citizenry. And whereas April is nationally recognized as Volunteer Recognition Month, providing an opportunity for us to express gratitude and appreciation to the countless individuals who generously give of themselves to serve others. And whereas St. Vincent de Paul, an esteemed organization within our community, is hosting the 3rd annual Love and Renewal Volunteer Appreciation, a special event dedicated to celebrating the efforts and achievements of our volunteers. And whereas the Love and Renewal event serves as a platform to honor the commitment and compassion of volunteers, highlighting their significant role in fostering love, renewal, and positive change in Billings and beyond, I therefore, William Cole, Mayor of Billings, Montana, proclaim April 2024 as Volunteer Recognition Month in our city, and urge all residents to join me in expressing our deep gratitude to the volunteers who selflessly dedicate their time and effort to making our community a better place, and commend St. Vincent de Paul for their dedication to recognizing and celebrating the contributions and volunteers through the Love and Renewal event. Their efforts are instrumental in fostering a culture of appreciation and support for volunteerism in Billings. And I should have said, when I'm done with these proclamations, if we have any representatives from any of the organizations who requested the proclamations, I'll ask you to come forward if you'd like to add anything relevant to the proclamation. Next is National Therapy Animal Day. Whereas there are thousands of pet partners, therapy animal teams serving in communities across the United States, and whereas Pet Partners has designated April 30 as National Therapy Animal Day, and whereas scientific research shows that interacting with therapy animals can reduce stress, relieve depression, slow heart rate, lower blood pressure, and strengthen the immune system, and whereas therapy animal teams in the city of Billings play an essential role in improving human health and well-being through the human-animal bond, and whereas therapy animal teams interact with a variety of people in our community, including veterans, seniors, patients, students, and those approaching the end of life. And whereas these exceptional therapy animals who partner with their human companions bring comfort and healing to those in need, and whereas we encourage more pet owners to consider becoming pet partner volunteers to help our community by creating greater access to meaningful therapy animal visits. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim April 30, 2024 as National Therapy Animal Day in the City of Billings, and encourage our citizens to celebrate our therapy animals and their human handlers. Further, I publicly salute the service of therapy animal teams in our community and in communities across our nation. Lastly, is recognition of Provider Appreciation Day. Whereas Child Care Aware of America and other organizations nationwide are recognizing child care providers on May 10, 2024. And whereas child care has provided a safe, nurturing place for the enrichment and development of millions of children nationwide and is a vital force in our economy. And whereas licensed child care capacity meets only 44% of statewide demand and just 40% of the demand in Yellowstone County. And whereas care providers are indispensable for the well-being and economic security of young children and families in Billings, and whereas child care programs, which are mostly small businesses that are run and staffed predominantly by women, continue to recover from hardships stemming from the pandemic to meet the needs of more families. And whereas the City of Billings recognizes that child care has been and continues to be a lifeline for families, communities, and the economy. And whereas the future depends on the quality of early childhood experiences provided to young children today, support for high-quality child care represents a worthy commitment to our children's future. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, hereby proclaim May 10, 2024 as Provider Appreciation Day in Billings and urge all citizens to recognize child care providers for their important work and how valuable they are for our community. With that, is there anyone who came tonight that would wanted to speak to any of these proclamations? If so, please come to the podium immediately, and we'll just ask that you take about 3 minutes and tell us who you are and why you're here this evening.
Hello, Mayor and councilors. I'm Bianca Bell. I am this is my partner, Corella DeVille, and we are here representing Pet Partners in regards to April 30th being Pet Partners Day. I would just like to share some thoughts that me and Corella wrote down. My furry partner, Corella, and I would like to share our sincere gratitude for this opportunity of being present at this meeting and hearing the proclamation for the National Therapy Animal Day, which, as I said, is on April 30th. My hope is because of your willingness to take the time to honor such a day, that more people will be inspired by this calling, either by becoming a team themselves or allowing such special therapy to become part of their employment or through their own personal experience. On behalf of the 9 different animals Pet Partners certifies, insures, and license, I leave you with their thoughts. The dog says woof, the cat says meow, the rabbit says hop, the pig says oink, the horse says neigh, the bird says tweet, the llama says hum, and the rat and guinea pig say squeak, squeak. Thank you, and if you guys need any therapy, we'll be in the back.
All right, thank you very much. Corral, did you want to add anything? I guess not. All right, well, thank you very much. Anybody else?
I'm going to follow that one, but thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. I just wanted to state briefly, my name's Jonathan Smith with St. Vincent de Paul. I'm the Development Coordinator at the organization, and we just thank you for observing the volunteer appreciation event we're having here on Friday, and yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to council reports. Anything this evening from council? We have reports on organizations you serve. All right. City administrator reports. Chris is out of town, so Kevin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, the first thing was Chris is out this week with some needed family time away from town here, so he'll be out. Both Chris and I will be out next week. We're headed to a GOSMA conference in Spearfish, South Dakota. Consent item D, as in dog, staff is recommending it be removed from the agenda by motion of council. The contractor has not submitted a schedule by the time of this meeting, so we do ask that you would remove that from the consent agenda. And reminder, there's no council meetings the week of April 29th, as it is a bye week, and there is no ex parte communications after 3 o'clock. And that's all I have tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll address that. We might as well do that now, Council, before we go into item number 1. Councilmember Aspenleiter. We'll get to that next. Councilmember Rowan.
Mayor, I apologize. I don't know if there's an intent to do this later, but I think, isn't this the meeting where generally we decide if we'll be holding extra work sessions for the budget and schedule those dates?
Kevin, I know those dates were mentioned the other day. Do you know where we're at in that process?
I do think we have them penciled in on our council calendar, but I don't think it's not on the agenda tonight on what those exact dates are, but I can certainly pull those up and give them to you.
Do you remember off the hand?
Aren't they the 6th and 7th? Aren't they our next two? Okay.
What were those days again?
May 6th and 7th, I believe, were two of them, and then not the following week, but the week after, the Monday and Tuesday.
Okay. All right, thank you. Back then to the agenda, Councilmember Asselmeyer.
I'll move to remove item 1D from tonight's agenda to be rescheduled per staff.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Absalom, second by Councilmember Neese to delay to a future date to be determined by staff, item 1D as in dog. Any discussion? Seeing none, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on then to public comment on things that we will not have a public agenda or a public hearing on later. So if you're here for something that has a public hearing later, you can wait until then. But if you're interested in commenting on item 1, 4B, or 7, and there's a copy of the agenda back on that card, now is the time to comment. Item 1 is anything on the consent agenda. That's the long one with all the subparts. Item 4B is the Brosco Valley or Park bid award. And item 7 is the 1889 Brewing TIF Award. We will not have public hearing for those things later. So this is your time. Would anybody like to comment on item 1, 4B, or 7? No one is coming forward to the podium, so we'll close the public comment, initial comment period, and move to item number 1, our consent agenda. Separations. Councilmember Aspenleiter.
So I'd like to separate agenda item 1F, memorandum MOU with Billings Bench, and then for purposes of recusal, I'd like to separate Q2.
Thank you very much. Item 1F, as in Frank, bills of the week for March 25th. And I'm sorry, what was the other one in the middle there?
F and Q2.
Only F and Q2. Okay. Very good. Councilmember Gulick? Any other separations? Okay, Councilmember Neese?
I'll make a motion to approve the items of the consent agenda as submitted with the exception of the items removed for separation.
Which is fine. I'm just going to ask if there were any other separations before we entertain that motion. I don't see any, so very good. Motion is to approve those other items. Is there the non-separated items? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Joy. Any discussion on the non-separated items? Councilmember Boyette.
Mayor, I just think we should acknowledge the donations that we received.
I appreciate that. Would you like to do that, Councilmember
Yes,
Boyette?
sir. The donations from the Billings Public Library and Library Foundation to the library from the foundation and the Friends of Library, and to the parks from the Northwest Energy, and of course to the police department from Patricia Schmidt. I think it's important to acknowledge these.
Very good, and much appreciated. Any other discussion on the motion, which is for approval of the non-separated items? Councilmember Bernice.
Mayor, I just want to emphasize the great work that our code enforcement's doing, and we're going to be approving the second reading of the ordinance and item N, O, and P, which I think is going to really help our city work and clean up with a lot of complaints that we've had over the years. And so I look forward to code enforcement doing a great job to help clean up and kind of address some of these broken window theories and help reduce crime throughout the city. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Bernice. And just a reminder that item 1O, the graffiti ordinance, does establish or in conjunction with the resolution we passed, the graffiti reward fund. So if any members of the public are interested in helping us catch people who are putting graffiti up, please think about making a contribution to that fund. You can contact the city finance director or code enforcement coordinator, Tina Hoger, and they can help you through that process. Anything else? Okay, we'll move to a vote. The motion is for approval of the non-separated items. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. First separated item is item 1D, amendment number 1, I apologize, 1F, draft memorandum of understanding with Billings Bench Water Association. Councilmember Aspenleiter, that was your separation. Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, maybe if it's okay with you, Mayor, maybe Ms. Malin can kind of speak to this and provide some color, context, and clarity as to where this stemmed from and what its intent is.
Sure, thank you, Councilmember Aspenleiter. So Mayor and Council, we've been working with the BBWA, as a lot of you know, for quite some time. We're now a user on the BBWA. So as they're searching for funding to help line their canal, to help possibly find ways to keep it from breaching and overtopping and all those things, they've asked us to sponsor some grants for them because they can't get money directly. We think that it's in the citizens' best interest to participate in some of those projects. Of course, if it's all the way out in the county and won't impact us, they wouldn't ask us. They have other sponsors. But for projects that impact us, that could possibly financially be beneficial to us even, city staff thinks it's good to sponsor those. What this is a really generic, DNRC had a template and they want to see that the city is sponsoring these. So it's a very generic template. It was meant to be project specific, but since they have several of these coming, we did a general one that set out some terms that said we're willing to sponsor if you go after these funds. So this was a pretty generic agreement. We intend to do project specific ones as they come in, but they probably will be less than the signing authority for Chris. So the thought was to have all of you weigh in on the big picture, and then we would do the smaller ones as they come up and work on the terms of those. So that's what was behind this.
Councilmember Aspenleiter, any further in the way of questions or comments?
Yeah, and thanks Debbie for that clarification. So I sent out some very specific questions, and after talking with Debbie, it became a little bit more clear to me what the intent of this was. I still hold heavy reservation about partnering with the BBWA and opening ourselves to liability through that partnership with that ditch. And I don't think that this MOU goes even remotely far enough to clear up the indemnification language. If you read the section on indemnification, it's incredibly vague. There needs to be a heck of a lot more beefing up of that section to be comfortable with that. I'm concerned that, yes, this is a generic DNRC document, but it doesn't talk about the very specifics in risk that we see with this particular situation. Remember, the DNRC put this together thinking about irrigation districts, generally speaking, in Huntley project in the middle of nowhere, where they're partnering typically with a conservation district that has no other legal bearing associated with it. Our situation with the BBWA is vastly different. So what I would ask of council is at the very least to table this for further discussion and clarification and allow staff to work with legal to try to beef up that indemnification section, to try to very specifically clarify what the limits are of our involvement. And I think the mayor pointed out some very key wording changes that are concerning about insinuating that we are a partner with BBWA, which we are not. So I think there needs to be a much deeper look at this. Personally, I don't like it at all because I think it sets a precedence, and I don't think it puts a timeline on when we're involved and when we're not. How far into this do we go, and for how long? Are we going to partner forever and ever, amen, with BBWA, or are we just going to partner with them until we get to the point in which we've fulfilled our obligation to make up that 30 CFS that we need to fill our reservoirs in that agreement? I think those are all very pertinent conversations that we should have and have some thoughtful discussion around if we actually want to put an MOU in place. And if we do, how long is that valid for? Remember also that there are 5 or 6 other irrigation companies that operate within the city limits. And When we do this for one, most certainly we will get approached by Canyon Creek, by Suburban Ditch, by Big Ditch, by High Ditch. You know, all of them will start to see that, oh, hey, the city partnered and is willing to administer this, and they're going to come knocking too. And what's our answer going to be with the precedent that we set with this agreement? This may have some extenuating circumstances, and I appreciate Debbie trying to look at this holistically. I just think this is one that council needs to weigh in on, whether we actually want to partner at this level or not, and what is the legal implications of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Asplater. Councilmember Rupsis and Boyette wanted to be recognized, so I will recognize them unless you wanted to make a motion. If not, at this time, I'll pass to them. So Councilmember Rupsis, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Gina, I see that this MOU did go through legal review. Do you want to weigh in here on the city's risks and any legal issues associated with it?
Thank you, Councilmember Rupsis, Mayor and Council. Actually, this agreement was actually reviewed by Stacy. She handles the Public Works Department, and unfortunately, she was out of the office today, so I didn't get a chance to discuss it with her. And I have not read it as thoroughly as she did, so I'm actually not ready to weigh in. I think that there are some modifications we can make to this agreement just to clarify some of the issues and to alleviate some of the concerns. So I think you all should have the policy discussions tonight and then let us work on some of those details and figuring out some language.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, let's say we table this or put it aside for a while. What problem does that create? Is there a time frame, a week, a month, a year? Can we take some time? How does it affect if we say no today, but yes later or whatever?
So there is one grant that that BBWA has already received, and they need to have it signed by May 15th, I think it is. So we have time to go to the next meeting for that specific one. If we want to just sign a project-specific agreement for that one, we can bring that and have a discussion about bigger ones. We can bring these on a per each basis if that's the council's preference. So we're okay not approving this tonight. We do need to have it on the next agenda for at least one of the grants.
Okay, Councilmember Boyette.
And how much is that grant going to be for, the one for May 15th that you would?
If I tell you off the top of my head, I'll be wrong.
I mean, is it a lot of money or is it?
No, I actually think it's probably within Chris's signing authority.
So it's not a lot of money?
I think it's probably on the order of $50,000 to $75,000, but I would have to get back to you on that for sure.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Rowan.
I think this was discussed, Debbie, or even Andy. I don't care who wants to weigh in on this. I think we discussed this a little by email, but I'll just put this concern. It strikes me that 5% for administrative costs is low. And I would imagine the city has a regular indirect rate that it puts into grants that is something other than 5%. So I'm curious, A, why we said 5%, and B, if we think from a management perspective that's an adequate sort of overhead charge.
I will talk, and Andy will probably make some gestures behind me if I say it wrong, but I'll try. So in this particular case, we are truly a financial pass-through, and then we double-check what the consultants are sending. So BBWA will hire an engineering firm, and they will submit the reports, they'll submit the billing, they'll submit everything that has to be done. We fact-checked it, and then we reimburse them. So our time on this really is not extensive. And it goes through Andy's group, so if you think that's not right, but we thought 5% probably covered the time we would have to review those and then pass it through.
If I could just ask a follow-up, Mayor, when you say fact check, what do you mean? Are we going out, are we inspecting for completeness? I mean, what does fact check mean?
So usually it's to make sure that the applications are complete. So when they do a pay application, the consultant will put it together, they'll sign it, they will certify that they did the work, and then we will look at it and say, yep, this is in accordance with the agreement, and then we'll process that.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess from my perspective, I don't generally like template agreements because they're designed to serve the interest of whoever drew it up, not necessarily the city of Billings. So I would ask that we just go through a fine-tooth comb here and make sure the city's interests are protected, that we're clearly, insulated from liability, that we're not having a deeper ongoing relationship. I would have a preference for a per project basis, that we not do this sort of blanket, but that we do this by a grant by grant. I recognize that's a little bit of time on our agenda, but I think it also makes it very clear that this is not a partnership, but a one-time decision of independent projects that are in the city's interest to have an administrative relationship. So that would be sort of my suggestions for the good of the order. I think we need to acknowledge that there's real risk here for the city, and I would hope an MOU could be a little more narrowly tailored to reflect that.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Aspenleiter, you wanted to follow up on something.
And I guess, Mr. Mayor or Kevin, maybe you can answer this question. Can we put this on the next work session prior to our next public regular business meeting to talk through what that looks like, hopefully having a draft that we can look at and have that real conversation about whether we want to do this as a whole, do we want to do this project one-off, and at what level are we looking to get? I don't want to get bogged down in that tonight, but if we can put that on a work session before we then move this on a regular business agenda in May, I think there could be some value in that.
Kevin?
So, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Aspenleiter, I'd say that we probably could not get it on the work session by next Monday. Again, I mean, we could certainly look at it, we could talk at our tactical, but more than likely it would come. I guess we do have two Mondays from now, but I don't know what that agenda looks like offhand. Oh, and they're all budget, I'm being reminded at that stage, so that probably would not happen. I think the general policy questions, that I'm seeing here is, number one, you want to beef up the indemnification section, but we truly do need to kind of get direction from council. Do you want to see this as a general policy template with some beefed up items in there? Or do you want to see it on a per project type basis? Like Deb said, we can bring that one to you on May 12th and you see them individually. And then I would also like the question answered, if it is under Chris's signing authority and all that, are we still bringing those to council? And then under what guise, would we be doing that and bringing those in front of council if they are within that signing authority, if we have the direction that council wants to proceed tonight?
Okay, Councilor Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, just a disclosure, I am a customer of the BBWA, and I do get their water and pay them a rental fee every year. But this would not impact me, at all. Unless someone else objects to that, I'll continue on. So I guess my concern is when I saw this, I knew that we were a user of the water, from the head gate to the spillage in the reservoir. But I think when we talk about these other projects in this MOU, and as was brought up, is we do it one time for them, even within that confined area. But we've had lots of different areas where the parkland in the city around the ditch is starting to fail, and that could be the next thing that we're going to go to for a project to get. And so I am concerned that this would lead into more and more of that. So I'm not 100% sure. I think that we want to accept some of that liability. And so the other question I have is, if the city administrator has the ability to approve some of these, would that not still put the city at liability if he's doing these grants? So I think it is something we have to be concerned about is, do we want even the city administrator partnering like this? Because here it is in a public setting, we're talking about partnering with the BBWA. If there's something happens, now they're going to be indicating that we're partners and be liable as the city. So I know as a user of the ditch, I mean, if something happens to the ditch, I have no liability if something happens other than my water stops running and, I got to turn my pump off. Otherwise, I burn up my pump. And so I think as a user of the ditch, as the city user of the ditch, I think that's where we need to really make sure we're there without having to assume any type of liability.
Thank you, Councilor Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess this is a question for Director Melling. What other type of pass-through organization would you have if the City of Billings, if the BBWA applies for a grant? Usually when you apply for a grant, you have to name your pass-through organization, and that's part of the basis of an agreement for the grant, is that you have identified a pass-through organization. So if the City of Billings is not a pass-through organization, what other organizations, or if the if the BBWA has other grants with other organizations that are passed through, who are they? What would it be? Would it be a county? Would it be another municipality? What would be an appropriate pass-through organization? Thank you.
So every grant is a little bit different, but most of the time it's a governmental agency. So you're talking county, city, sometimes a conservation district, but generally a governmental agency.
Okay. Councilor, I guess what I'm hearing is there's no urgency on anything other than the May 15 project, but there is some urgency there. We may want to have a much larger policy discussion. Time doesn't allow for that very well, so at least in the short term. But I guess what I'm hearing is a general consensus, correct me if I'm wrong, though, that staff should move ahead with getting only the May 15 contract before us for the next business meeting, but work internally with DNRC, with council members, whatever, to revise the agreement, to beef up the indemnification language, to make sure there is disclaimers about partnership, don't use that kind of terminology, a clear definition of what the project is and is not, and when it terminates, so that there's some sideboards around this one project. And then we'll have to come back to the larger issue as soon as possible on, is it something we want to do at all? We may still have to have that debate even for the May 15 project one, of course. I don't want to prejudge that issue, but I guess that's what I'm hearing. Councilmember Ashland, you had your hand up?
If it's okay with council, I'll make a motion here. Mr. Mayor, I'll move to postpone agenda item 1F to the next regular business meeting, specifically with the agreement tailored to the one project only.
Second. Motion made, Councilmember Afterlighter, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, and I don't want to make this, I want to make my comment specific to this motion, which is just a postponement, but in that larger context, I believe that this council and prior councils have been in support of the BBWA lining and taking care of issues. And if these grants are specific to the BBWA, specifically addressing issues that are vulnerabilities, I would like to say, I think council has already supported that in the past, but this postponement, I'll support it. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll support this postponement as well. And I think of the other issues that were talked about, it was the fee that the city would be taking. And so I think that needs to be addressed and looked at a little closer, because I think it's probably lower than it should be.
Okay, that issue is still out there. Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, Councilmember Joy's comments just sort of popped a question into my mind. Is the county not willing to sponsor grants that benefit portions of the canal that run through the city? Why is this coming up?
So, Mayor and Council, absolutely. They have sponsored many of these in the past. That's how they've historically done this. At this point, the projects that they're looking at, the tunnel study, the lining, the head gate, all impact us, financially even. So that's why they've asked us, because we have quite a bit of stake in it anyway.
I understand that. Is the county unwilling to do that if the city won't?
They have not asked on these particular ones because they came to us and we said we would forward this for consideration.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion before we vote? The only thing I would add, just to reinforce something I said in an email to all the council members, my concern over insurance coverage for the BBWA, I have a lot less concern about being in cooperation with the BBWA if they have substantial insurance. If they do not, that increases my concern level. So maybe that's something else that staff could get some information on in the interim. So, okay, anything else? Okay, so the motion is clear, I hope, and put off item 1F, but have it come back tailored only to the May 15 related grant and revisions to the contract along the lines that have been discussed. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes. Then item 1Q2, please. Councilmember Gulick.
I move that we approve item 1Q2. Second.
Second by Councilmember Bernice. Any discussion? Motion is for approval of item 1Q2. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the exception of Councilmember Aspenlighter, who did not vote. Brings us to item, or to our regular agenda. Denise, would you read item number 2?
Public hearing and approval of FY 2024-2025 Annual Action Plan and Community Development Block Grants, CDBG, and Home Investment Partnerships Home Budget Allocations. Staff and Community Development CD Board recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Brenda Beckett is our presenter.
There's usually people here. So I'm just going to wing it.
You can run back and forth.
I'm not very good technologically.
And Brenda, would you just make sure the mic is on? I assume it is, but.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. We'll just see if it works. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, I am here to present to you the drafted annual action plan for Community Development Block Grant and for Home Investment Partnerships Program funding. Oops. Just want to call out that Wyeth is on the channel here too. So, hey, W.
Hey.
So, perfect. Our annual action planning actually began last September with a public hearing during our performance report. Our community development board likes to get community needs and feedback on how to address those community needs before they develop the application that is put online in December. And so that's why we start in September. Our applications were due or released in early December and then due in mid-January. We did receive one application for CDBG funding. However, it was substantially incomplete, so our board voted to not push that application forward. We put our board made recommendations for funding on April 2nd during their routine meeting, and we have a public comment period that actually ends this evening. So if I can get this submitted to HUD, which would be fantastic, we actually don't have our allocation numbers from HUD. And this has happened one other time where we don't know how much funding we're going to get. So just to give you a little heads up on that. That's why everything is estimated remaining funding. So you'll see that in the annual action plan and also in the documents for the attachments on your memo. So this is a lot going on here, but basically the structure of our division is the city council, of course, the city administrator. Wyeth is my supervisor. I'm the manager of the department, and I have 3 staff members and a half-time vacant grants technician position. Our board governs everything from our plans, our reports, our programs, activities. They also participate in our audits from HUD and sometimes the city. So we do have 6 of those members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for diligently getting 3 positions filled this year, that's a feat in itself. But we do have 6 of those positions are low-income area representatives, and at-large positions are occupied by 3 individuals. So we've been receiving CDBG since the 1970s and home since the 1990s. I'm guessing we're going to receive about $650,000 in CDBG, maybe a bit less. And then I think we'll receive $350,000 in home, although it is supposed to be a 17% decrease in federal allocations. So I think that our bill has been signed by Congress and the President, and now it is up to HUD to determine the allocations for funding. So hopefully I'll be able to submit my May 15th. I hope so. Oh, yes. And everybody asks, what is low income in the city of Billings? Well, that is just over $71,000 for a family of 4. Our allocations
have decreased significantly over time, and there is a transitional kind of white paper that's attached to your council memo that talks about loans being prioritized from the year 2012 forward, and you can kind of see why that happened. And again, I'm guessing maybe $950,000, maybe $1 million, I'm not quite sure. So our consolidated plan, actually this will be the last year of our 5-year consolidated plan, so I'll start using data to look at the next 5-year consolidated plan. So if you have any policy additions, I know you just recently had a strategic council or strategic planning session. I don't have the updated priorities there, but we've been paying attention to your priorities throughout the years, including CPTED, so crime prevention through environmental design. So we have something for you on that end too. But our comp plan findings that City of Billings has housing cost burden. We have limited housing choice and availability, low minority homeownership and poverty. And these are the programs that, goals and programs that we developed to address those. COVID kind of flipped over our apple cart with the 5-year plan. So we funded a bunch of COVID projects, and many of you know about those. Parks projects and CPTED projects as well. So that was outside in addition to that scope. So we're recommending a 20% administration. You're talking about, I was really appreciative of the council bringing up a 5% administrative fee. That is extraordinarily low. And the risk that the city takes, bringing those grants through, the city is the fiscal responsible party, as we are with those administration dollars. So those are really valid concerns. So we're recommending the 20% cap, whatever it turns out to be for CDBG. And for home, it's a 10% cap. Crime prevention, we would like to allocate $100,000 in that program. I'm hearing that there are people that are much more educated about this than I, but there is an assessment of the parks, and we actually have a VISTA member that's helped working on those parks and low-income neighborhoods, and those with higher crime rates would be the ones that we would work with the Parks Department and the Parks Board, and also City Council to get those CPTED improvements underway. We're looking at leveraging $430,000 for the AmeriCorps Vista program. I think you met everybody last month, yes, earlier? Yes, last month. And we're asking for $75,000 for the cost share for that program. We're looking at $82,000 and change to bring our current allocation for the St. John's foreclosed property to have a $200,000 budget for renovations. And I think that that bid will be, the City Council just voted to reject that bid a couple meetings ago, and now we're looking at allocating. My staff member ran a new RFP process, and she has a new bid, so the $200K would fix the property. For the remainder of the funding would sit in the foreclosure program. And again, this is all close and shovel ready, so if we get another application for affordable housing development, that could be shifted to fund that rather than these allocations. So for home, we have to have a minimum 15% of the new funding go to a community housing development organization. We've not had a community housing development organization apply for funding for the last few years through the Affordable Housing Development Program, but HUD is allowing us to stack that money, so we have about $200,000 in that program. So maybe in the next couple of years, we'll be able to allocate bigger funding, like we will with the Mitchell Court project that I'll go over in a couple seconds too. And the remaining funding there would be allocated to affordable housing development. So upcoming, we do have the Mitchell Court project. Legal documents are pending approval. There's 32 housing units, and so this will come to you at a future meeting, I think in May. We have allocated prior year's funding to that, so you won't see it in the revenue sheet that's attached to the consolidated plan or the annual action plan. But this is coming on your agenda. These are the folks that did the Jackson Court project, so if you've driven by there and seen how beautiful it is, we're looking forward to seeing this occur as well, that this take place. You can kind of see the property there too. I think I saw a train, like a boxcar sitting there. So it'll be a really nice improvement to the neighborhood. Upcoming also, we have our board is now looking at allocating up to $100,000 to the organizations that applied for the home ARP funding. For a variety of social service organizations. And so as soon as we get that legal drafted and to the legal department, the legal agreement, then we'll be coming to City Council to allocate those funds. So that's actually city council appropriations in support of our division. You've been paying annual rent and parking through the general fund since we moved out of the old library building into the Miller building in 2013. And then you've actually allocated almost $450,000 cash into support housing programs. And that's a revolving fund. And the funding came from contingency fund and also South 27th land sale. And that money has assisted over 40 households with home ownership and home repairs. So questions on the annual action plan?
Very good, thank you. Brenda, Councilmember Kennedy.
Could you go back to the slide that showed it? That one right there with the 100,000.
Which one? I'm sorry.
The
This one here?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all respondents recommended for funding up to 100,000 per award. Do you have, you don't know if you have enough for 100,000 per award?
We do. We have $1 million for that program, and I should have put that up there. My apologies. So there's $1 million available for that program to allocate to organizations for supportive services. A couple of the organizations applied for all of that $1 million, and they would run the whole thing. And then some other organizations only asked for $50,000 to allocate those funds.
Did all of them that are up here right now, do they have a proposal what they're actually going to use the money for?
Yes, sir. It is, all of their applications are on our website, and I can forward that to you, but it's pretty easy. It's a city standard website, billingsmt.gov/home ARP, and their proposals are right online, so everybody can review those. And we'll give you a rundown of what those look like too whenever it comes for your approval. So the fairest way we could figure out on how to do this and how to spend down this funding and not reserve a big piece of funding for an organization that may not spend it down quickly enough is to allocate the funding to everybody and then figure out some kind of renewal program or an extension program for their grant so that organizations that are requesting reimbursements and are expending the funds quicker will get allocated more funding. So we would like to get the money out the door as soon as we can. And so that was one way for us it was very difficult for the board to say, well, we're going to give this organization $50,000. We're only going to give this, this one $75,000, especially when they asked for $1 million. So we're kind of playing it first come, first serve with those organizations that can adequately demonstrate that they've served the qualifying population and are eligible for reimbursement.
Just a follow-up to my question is when folks are able to do this and able to offer, must serve all the qualifying populations and be able to go forward, does that project have to be finished within the year? And then what happens if you're appropriating money and they have a lot of other money in their reserves? Are you asking them why they're asking for the money or what they do with the other money? If you get rental, and one of the areas I'm looking at is the Homefront Partners. A lot of their areas are they have already paid for their complexes, okay? There's nothing in their, the information that comes to you that states exactly what they're using with the rental dollars that come in. It's a pot of money out there, and it's unrestricted dollars. And I've just been very curious of what these organizations, because they're dealing with millions of dollars of tax dollars, because all of these projects that a lot of these housing authorities and housing places have are all tax dollars. So how do you really look and see what they're doing with the dollars that have been paid in year after year and all of that, and what their expenditures are, so they're not giving themselves big raises and other things such as that? I'm just very curious on that, because you deal with a lot of, well, $1 million right here.
We do receive a copy of their audit, and so we can look at those audits and see where the funding came in and where the funding is going out. It's not going to encompass all of the financial operations. I think that if you talk with with Patty Webster about how those dollars are allocated, she would definitely have a much better understanding. And also some city council members have a very good understanding of how their development corporation is involved, set up within that organization. We did ask, we asked a couple of things when they applied for the funding. We asked them, if you're funding existing staff, how are you paying them now? And why can't you pay them with that money and continue to do that work? So that was one of the big questions our board had. Other questions they had, and one of the certifications that we put in our request for reimbursement fund is that they need to certify that they don't have other funding and have not been allocated other funding in order to utilize this funding. So we can't use this money like CDBG and Home to supplant money that they already have. And so if we find that out in the future, it would be, the city would have to be repaid those dollars. So it's not a perfect system, because there's all kinds of ways to do your accounting, but I think we're doing an adequate job of asking them and asking them to qualify why they need this funding. And specifically for Homefront, I believe that they're funding 2 additional positions to do more case management and getting people into housing. Just off the top of my head, sir, I would have to look back or Carly knows all of these applications inside and out, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Councilmember Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions and a few comments. Would you like me to just stick to questions?
No, whatever, have at it.
All right. So Brenda, I think we're making some progress here. I have some questions, but I want to acknowledge that I think there's some really good things in here. I'm really pleased to see no further funding going to the first-time homebuyer program. I think that's a better allocation of resources. I've been at times frustrated with the amount that goes into the VISTA program, but I want to recognize that I've seen a real effort to align VISTA, city-sponsored VISTAs with city priorities, and I just really want to recognize that as some positive work. I still have real process concerns. I don't like this process that we do. I'm uncomfortable with approving a grant where we have not seen your response to public comment. So typically, there's public comment, an agency responds, and then we would sign off on it. We don't do that here, and I don't like that. And once again, it's coming to us at sort of a drop-dead timeline. I mean, I suppose we could stick it on the May 13th, but that would make all of us uncomfortable. So I just continue to believe a public hearing should be held separately that allows you to get comments and respond to them, and then we should approve that packet. And that we should have time to discuss some things, because I have a few things I want to discuss here. So first, what if the allocation comes in lower or higher? Process-wise, what happens?
So when we go back to the allocation, so it would be 20% off the top for those admins. My guess is it could be around 600,000 for, there's still quite a bit when we look at remaining foreclosure funding. It'd have to go down 200,000 for us to be really concerned. But I have not seen that, knock on wood, in the past. So I think that whenever you look at the remaining funding amounts, it's big enough then, so we can cover the priorities and then focus on the remaining funding categories for foreclosure and affordable housing development.
Okay, so your goal then would be to fully fund the specific projects and reduce the sort of remaining buckets. That's how you would approach it?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Help me understand a little bit about what we've done in the last year as we look to do some more of these partners. The challenge that we have here is this isn't a lot of money. And I think sometimes the attitude is, well, it's not a lot of money, we don't really need to worry about it. My approach is we have to get every bang for the buck we can. And typically that's going to mean partnerships. So what are we doing to reduce administrative burden, application burden, engage new stakeholders? What are we doing to be more partner focused?
We had a stakeholder meeting. It wasn't last December, but the December prior, that we did tons of advertising for and invited all of the housing developers and property agents and did a public meeting on available funding. And at that point, we had about $1 million to allocate for affordable housing. And at that time also, Andy was, releasing the information about city-owned land. Which I've heard that some city council members have had questions about as well. So that was a really big push to get applicants and to to talk to people about the application process, answer questions for folks. We push out the applications every year to all of our partnering organizations via email. Because the shift has been, to loan products in the CDBG and home side, that's been harder for people to apply for it. People really like grants, and that whole shift happened, of course, when our funding took a crash. So we engage people as much as we can, I think. We are a very small staff. We only have 4 individuals, and we're currently managing 3 times the federal funding that we ever have because of the new allocations through CV and home ARP. So we're pedaling as fast as we can, and of course, we could do a better job. It would be fantastic to do that. I would really love to talk more about process and try to figure that out a bit, because for us, it's, we've been, seeking comment for the last month, and so nothing's really come in. And typically, if we get a bunch of public comments, we do shuffle those forward. And you guys kind of get more public comments than we get, so it's typically, Wyeth is texting me at 4 o'clock, by the way. Nope, nothing's come through. So that's kind of the process. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about maybe it's 2 different meetings and a public hearing, and then this meeting is then the action meeting before submittal.
On that. The
Perfect.
last thing I want to just say, I think hopefully for council discussion, is I continue to not support the foreclosure effort. I don't think that that's maximizing our dollar. We are iterative in there. We are one house, one property, 1 or 2. I think there are higher and better uses, particularly given some of the priorities now. So I would be interested, Brenda, in setting aside your preference to keep the foreclosure. If council were to say, you know what, it's more important that we find a way to get whatever dollar we can into South Park Pool. Can't use CDBG to repair or maintain, but could we do something new at South Park? Or could we drive this into Family Justice Center because domestic violence is a priority of CDBG? What would need to happen for these dollars you have identified here for foreclosure, for those to get moved into an alternative, more public facility CDBG funding category?
We would have to work with the city departments in charge of those public facilities to get them to apply through the process and to engage with our board. And frankly, when we came into CV money, that's all we did. I mean, we had 4 different applications processes for CV. We focused on, social services, and then we're talking to parks, and then we're talking to parks. So we did many processes to try to engage all different partners to get that going.
Why can't we just direct you to put $300,000 into South Park Pool, or South Park Playground, or something in South Park, or the Family Justice Center?
Unfortunately, South Park is within a non-acceptable safe distance zone.
Right?
Yeah. So HUD has actually turned up the heat on their environmental review processes beyond anything I have seen in the 21 years I've been here. It is the most incredible. We're looking a mile away from the project site for underground storage tanks that may be leaking, even if we're not digging.
You're right, that rings a bell. What about a Family Justice Center, a domestic violence project?
That would be, if it's are we talking about the building or social services?
Building.
That would probably have to go through the same process.
You're telling me council can't direct you to put that in your plan?
We could put that in the plan. We could, if that was, but the problem with doing that is we didn't actually give that opportunity to any other organization. So we have to create a fair playing field and advertise that we're going to fund a specific council priority like family justice or social justice or domestic violence or whatever it is for a public facility, and then let all of the organizations apply and compete for that, because there has to be equal opportunity for.
Can the city not spend it? I'm saying for a Family Justice Center where the city is a partner, can we not use CDBG dollars as our contribution to the project?
That's a complicated question, I think.
Didn't mean for it to be.
It is. There's a lot of partners that we have to do an open and transparent process. So we'd have to shift some things. There's also our consolidated planning process that's beginning this fall. And if that's a priority for city council, then, we can put that language like we've have with SEPTED kind of all the way through that. I mean, if it's a priority then, and it's a public facility, then the city council would have to change their policy to not do loans for CDBG and somehow do a public facility grant or a lien on that property. Actually, home funding was used to build that project in the first place where the, where the Gateway House was.
That starts this fall, you're saying, that planning process?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Other questions for Brenda? Before we have a public hearing, we will have a public hearing on this item. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted a clarification, and I know that the Mitchell Court project is going to be coming forward at some point. I just wanted to ask, the same developer previously developed the Jackson Court. Was Jackson Court a subsidized project, or was that a market rate rent that's charged at Jackson Court?
I don't know their full funding scheme, but I believe Jackson Court was a low-income housing tax credit project, so it would be considered subsidized.
Thank you.
Yes, it was. Any other questions for Brenda? Okay, thank you, Brenda. We may come back to you. We'll open up for public hearing. So this is a public hearing on item number 2, the proposed annual action plan for CDBG and our home budget allocations. If anybody'd like to comment on item number 2, please come forward. Is there any public comment on item number 2? No one is coming forward. No indication of public comment, so we'll close the public comment on item number 2. Council, this does require approval, so is there a motion? Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the FY 2024-2025 annual action plan and CDBG and home budget allocations as recommended by staff and the CD board.
Second by Councilmember Joy. Okay, Councilmember Shaw, Joy, would either of you like to speak to your motion?
I'll just second what Councilmember Owen was saying. I think that there's some interesting ideas there that I know you don't have all the answers tonight, but I feel like it opened up a line of avenue I hadn't really thought about. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of those conversations maybe for next year. But thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, I do want to acknowledge the hard work of community development in bringing more alignment to this project. I am going to vote against it tonight simply to underscore my concerns, A, over process, and B, over the continued investment here of over $300,000 into foreclosures. That's going to get us 2 houses. There are better ways, I think, to leverage that dollars. I acknowledge that there's a planning process that we need to go to, and we really can't flip that tonight. But I really do want my concerns to be heard. So want to really recognize and commend the portions of this that I think are very strong. The SEPTED funding is really good. The Better Vista alignment, I'm thrilled to see. But I do want to stress my concern about those other 2 issues. So I'll be voting no tonight.
Very good. Councilmember Aston-Leiter, Councilmember Ripsis.
I'm going to echo Councilwoman Owen's sentiment. As you go into the planning process, I would encourage you to consider redirecting the investment of those foreclosure dollars into the Family Justice Center. I think that is a high priority for the council. Council's made that a priority as we're looking through budget and budget funding this year and years forward, and our commitment to the Family Justice Center. This could and should be an avenue that we look at to minimize impact to the general fund and to leverage those dollars to the best of their ability. So I'd encourage you to take that into consideration, and if you need that comment at whatever time in your planning process, I'm happy to participate and move that forward as a public comment and try to encourage your board to do that.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to also acknowledge the good stuff that's in here and the fact that you guys, I think, are probably stretched in terms of what it takes to actually just administer these federal grants. But I'm going to vote against this as well. I think it was last year we were here and we said, look, this plan is fine, but it's completely insufficient to what our community needs for affordable housing efforts, how we're addressing homelessness, what have you. And so I think we have to push. We have to say we need more out of our community development group than just administering these federal grants. These are a paltry amount of dollars. And we have such significant needs. I don't see community development engaged with the continuum of care. I don't see, I see the realtors going after a community land trust idea, and we don't see community development at the table there helping facilitate that. I just saw a presentation on, or Missoula has an affordable housing trust fund, and I just saw a presentation on the Gallatin Valley Housing Impact Fund, a similar type thing. Why aren't we bringing those ideas forward to expand what we can do to leverage these, again, these tiny amounts of federal dollars that we have? I think we need our community development group to be at the focus or the center of all those conversations going on in the community, because we're not going to get it all done with federal dollars. So I think we have to expand that. I don't want this vote to reflect that, I don't agree with this particular plan. I just think it's insufficient, and we have to do more. So, thank you.
Thank you for pointing out Wyeth. Director Friday is with us. Wyeth, you've got the floor, sort of, the screen. If the microphone, if your mic is on, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
We can, but it's a little light, so if you'd speak loudly.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to make it be as loud as possible. I just wanted to mention Councilmember Rupsis's comment, and really to several of the comments of the council regarding other ideas and kind of innovation and all. We've had some, and you'll see some discussion of this in our department budget overview when we visited with city administration with Chris and Kevin and Andy, that the challenge we have with community development as it's structured now, and I've said this before, but you'll hear me say it again right now, is that our funding is tied to these specific HUD grants and programs. And so we can work and, if we can reallocate or shift something based on the priorities of council and our action plan, within that, staff can work through some of that. The challenge is when you get out into the community and you start talking about bigger issues of homelessness, bigger issues of housing, SEPTED at a citywide, or across the whole city, as well as other things. The conversation I've had with administration, and Brenda's been part of it, is we need to look at a different model potentially for some resources to staff some positions to kind of address those, innovation and sustainability, or, different topics. And I'll just say real briefly, Councilmember Ripsis just mentioned the Housing Trust Fund in Missoula. Missoula actually has a department or division that works on sort of community innovation things that are outside some of this strict HUD programming, but they work through it, and it might be a model for us to look at. And that's referenced again in our budget overview. But I just wanted to mention that there's been this conversation behind the scenes, talk to City Administrator Kukulski, and we definitely are looking at it. We just have to look and bring to you, funding opportunities that can get us outside of just the HUD structure. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Kennedy.
I agree with Wyeth when he said maybe it's time we did something new. I think we've been doing the same thing over and over. I appreciate what the staff has done. I think this program has been the same program over and over again. The same people have come back for it. I've looked in some of these places, and administratively, their costs have gone up, things like that. And who are we falling back on? These funds. And I think we do get innovative. I think we look at a few new things. We're still sitting with the same amount of people out of homes that we had 2 years ago. So I'm going to vote no tonight, and hopefully we can make some changes to this program. Thank you.
Very good. Any other comment before we proceed to a vote? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is an issue, as been said earlier tonight by some people, that I think, again, I appreciate some of the changes that I've heard have come into this plan this time. I think some of the council priorities are in there, but I think that I was expecting more of the priorities of what the council has been talking about over the last several years to be in this plan, and yet some of the things still remain that have not worked out and have not been working. And so I am also not going to support this. I really wanted to see some better changes in this, really something that is going to impact the community in a more effective way. There's been a lot of questions, I think, raised on this. I would have liked to have seen some plan come to us earlier so that we can have maybe in a work session to talk about this, to make sure what the board is going to go after, that the council priorities were included in that. So then when this came to us, it would actually have some of the ideas of what the council is really looking at, and making sure that we hear what the residents need and what different organizations need, and I think that we need to really direct this a little bit better, and so I won't support this tonight as well.
Thank you very much. I'm just recognize people who haven't, and then we'll come back. Councilor Rowan, Councilor Boyette, and Councilor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. So who in the staff can answer this question? What happens if the council says no to this? What happens to this annual plan? Good, bad, or indifferent?
Then it doesn't get submitted to HUD. And we're not applying for HUD funding until a different plan is put into place and we can figure out an equitable way to engage the community partners so that they have adequate time and opportunity to apply. So we would potentially forego funding beginning July 1. This has never happened as far as I know. I would also like to have an affordable housing fund, but if you look at Missoula's organizational chart, I believe they have 15 staff that work in community development. I mean, they have a whole person that works on housing policy, and they have two whole individuals that are assigned to work on homelessness. And, so there's only 4 of us, and we actually can't stretch that far. And so, and I don't have a way to pay somebody to do that work. I don't have a funding source to pay a staff member to work on a non-HUD initiative. So that's the struggle that we have whenever, we talk about expanding and doing innovative things. It would be really fantastic if we had funding to pay for adequate staffing to be able to push that forward. We're often compared to Missoula in that vein, but I would ask people to look at their organizational chart and see the kinds of staffing resources that are put together in order to support whenever you look at community development, it's weird that we're named community development, actually. We're just the HUD grant piece. We're just CDBG and home. So it's a small amount of funding, and it's not enough to do everything we would want to do. I mean, even if we supported facilities, we could maybe do up to $500,000 for that, but it would be, maybe, but we'd have to figure out if they're able to administer that funding and to be able to meet compliance.
Brenda, can you just remind us what the submission deadlines are here?
It's May 15th, whenever I receive, if I receive the HUD allocation numbers.
Okay, and is there anything that you need to do between now and then other than obtain council approval?
Yeah, it takes me about 7 work days to upload the plan into HUD's IDIS system to submit for HUD.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Boyette?
So without this grant, does that affect any of your staffing at all?
Yes.
So what would happen if you didn't apply for this for staffing? What's the bottom line? Would you get rid of one of the 4 people then? Or what would it really do?
All of us.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Owen, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So we could.
I think I was up next, but it's.
Oh, I apologize.
I think we have the same question. So answer me this. If you have a commitment from some group of us who are frustrated to work on something between now and May 13th, can you upload it in advance, wait for a May 13th approval, and then hit submit?
If you are changing overall goals and priorities, we have to actually do data and substantiate that in order to be able to validate or to prove to HUD that we're meeting a community need. The Family Justice Center is an easy thing. I mean, we've had a Vista working on that forever. So that's we do have data on that, but we don't have data on some of these other kinds of, ephemeral needs that people are talking about.
I guess what I'm trying to understand here is there a path towards actually solving this now? Because I think you're hearing pretty strong council frustration. So do we have a path to solve this between today and 3 weeks from today?
I don't think I can answer that. I really don't. I mean, it takes me about 7 work days to upload this, and if you change all of the goals and priorities, then we're gonna have to roll back and substantiate some of those things in data, which we would be doing anyway this fall through a consolidated planning process, and then I would have to change most of the annual action plan, because if you'll see that the projects and priorities were established by HUD's data system and the data that they give us to evaluate housing, and I think we're making some really great progress by having a 32-unit project coming forward. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. So I don't think we've not made any progress in some of the things that you're talking about. And we do work with the continuum of care, and we have worked with them on the home ARP allocations from the very beginning. So.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy?
I guess I'm struggling to parse pieces together for you and to move this forward. So what I'm hearing is that there isn't enough time for you to get this submitted by May 15th if this gets pushed off until the 13th, even with trying to front load as much work as possible. Is that accurate? Or let me ask this another way. If the only change is the Family Justice Center this year, if that's the only thing that council is deciding to add on, can that get done in the next little bit? Not redoing all the goals and priorities, not redoing all the projects, but just that one allocation. Would that be a manageable thing to get done before the deadline? Because I don't want to miss the deadline.
Do you want to open up an application process to make it fair and equitable for other organizations to apply for this theme of funding?
I think no. I think it goes back to if it's the city's piece of this project. If this is where we pull the city's money from to support it.
And they've demonstrated the need for facility improvements. And they have estimates and budget, and they have people that are willing to take on CDBG requirements to pull this stuff forward, or?
I guess I'm trying to understand, like, I don't even know exactly how the funds could be used for that project, if it would need to be specific construction thing. You know, I mean, those are kind of the weeds that I don't understand enough to know exactly how to tell you, oh, $200,000 for, you know, this building that is very specific. So I'm trying to understand, would it need to be that specific for you, or?
Yeah, we have to do program development in whatever avenue you're deciding to take. My suggestion would be to plan a substantial amendment, submit to HUD what we have, and we already have on our slides closed and shovel ready. So if no big affordable housing application doesn't come in, and you know, foreclosures are few and far between, I mean, there's adequate time to do a substantial amendment, to do some work with the owner of the building, which is YWCA still, correct? And to see if they're willing to undertake, to see what they would utilize the funding for, if that's public facility.
So we'll just follow up, Mayor, so I understand. So if we approve the plan as it is, there is still this amendment option that could go forward at some point in the future that could potentially shift some of this funding and the focus. Is that right? So this isn't our only bite of the apple in terms of that one project. Is that accurate?
And
okay.
we do close and shovel ready because we want to remain flexible to community needs. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a question. How much money does the city of Billings put into housing? Not HUD funding. Does the city of Billings, from our budget, put into housing?
Just the 2 allocations I noted before, the $445,000 that was established as a revolving loan fund.
So we, as a council, do not allocate funding into housing, but we're wanting the HUD money to be put into our city project for the Law and Justice Center. Think about that a little bit. And you've just put
Family Justice Center.
Family Justice Center, sorry, Family Justice Center, and we just started this conversation 20 minutes ago. Thank you.
Okay, Brenda, and we should have to move ahead, but I will just observe, although I appreciate the discussion and there's a lot that we can work on, We're coming to the table late in this process. There's a lot of frustration, largely because the dollars that have gone into this whole area have declined to about 50% over in recent years. Those are federal dollars, and of course, we wish there were more federal dollars, but there aren't. I'm not opposed to looking into the Family Justice Center option, but it does need to be shovel-ready. It's got to be able to stand on its own legs, compete against other applications, even though we might have a certain preference for it. And I don't think we're at that stage. So I would hate to see the rest of this funding jeopardized for what might be a good future idea, but is a future idea. So that's where I'm at. Are we ready to vote, or we have further discussion? Councilmember Rupsis, Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, just a quick comment. As my concerns and frustrations were not necessarily specifically about this plan, other than just the insufficiency, and I believe Wyeth has mentioned, we're going to get to that when we talk about budget. So that's coming up here really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and support this right now. We should not be trying to change this at the last second and trying to kind of sidestep public comment and all the thing that goes into the process that we have here. So I am going to support this tonight, even given my concerns, and we'll work on those during the budget process. Thank you.
Okay, further, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick procedure question, Mayor. I think that if this were to fail, and I'm not so sure it will now, but if it does fail and the presiding side were to tonight say they want to reconsider it, would that be something that you could reconsider tonight if you chose?
Whoever's in the prevailing side of that vote could.
Right, so if they would like to reconsider it, but would you, I think it's up to you to determine when it would be heard. So would you?
Oh, I see.
Would you give
so
the option?
Tonight, we would have basically a rediscussion, revote. I'll look to our parliamentarian, but I would be okay with that. If there was a reason to have a second bite of the apple.
Right, just wanted to know if that's it's even procedurally allowed.
I'll defer to Gina, but so Gina, just to make sure we're all on the same page, if this were to fail and a person who voted against it, in other words, was on the prevailing side, were to make a motion to reconsider, and that was approved, could I then immediately schedule it for reconsideration tonight? I think we could. It's still part of our agenda, so I would say yes. But what do you say?
Yes, Mayor. Yes, I think that because it's on the agenda, you can certainly rediscuss. You could have another vote if the vote was to reconsider it. Otherwise, it would have to be put, if you didn't do that, it would have to be put on a different agenda so that it could be noticed up properly. But yes, you could do it tonight.
That answered the question. Thank you, because I was concerned because of the jeopardy of the funds that if someone were to want to vote against this, there would still be a potential second bite of the apple to move it forward, but yet still understand that we as a council, really the plan that's presented to us really is not the plan that we would like to move forward on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I understand you'd like to comment. Our public hearing has closed, but Brenda, if you would like to have a little discussion and bring anything forward, feel free.
So Mayor, Director Friday does have his hand up again, if you'd like to acknowledge that.
I'm sorry, what's that, Kevin?
Director Friday does have his hand up again on Zoom.
Wyeth does? Okay. Wyeth, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess I just want to reinforce some of what Brenda said. This is extremely concerning that this might not pass tonight and or that there might be some reliance on future reconsideration, because literally, depending on what happens, if we lose the funding, then we don't have the staff, and we have to basically not have the staff, and then we can't even do some of the things that you're talking about us doing in the future. And so I guess that's what really is alarming is we're hearing the concerns, and we have some ideas. We obviously, a few things have been done in the right direction, but there's other things that clearly we need to address. But if we don't fund the program, then we can't even move forward with what you're talking about. I mean, it just kind of all goes out the door. So I guess I just want to reinforce that's what's very alarming when we're talking about the entire program. Thank you.
Okay, further, we'll try to wrap up discussion and proceed to a vote. Councilmember Aspenleiter?
I understand the situation, but This happens regardless of department every time. These things come to us with a week to spare to hit the submit button on the assumption that council is going to just rubber stamp and approve. And it's a procedural issue that city staff has got to start understanding. Like, these are not just given that they're going to be approved, especially when we have very little input on the front end. Like, I'm coming into this as a new council member 3 months in, and this isn't just the planning staff, but it feels like this happens every stinking time. And we're put in a box that, oh my God, if we don't approve this, then the whole thing goes away and it's Armageddon and we'll never get it back. That's the staff's fault. That's not our fault. That's the staff's fault. And the fact that we're sitting here again tonight is the staff's fault for this discussion.
Point of order. I call question.
Okay, so we have a motion to call the question. I guess we need a second for that. Is there a second? Do we have to approve the order, Gina? So I think I need a second for the motion to call the question. I do need a second. Okay, so we will now vote on whether to vote, and we'll need 2/3, which is 8. So if ready to vote now, say aye, or raise your hand. If you're ready, if you want to vote now, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so the motion passes. So we will proceed to a vote. The motion was for approval of the. That was Councilmember Shaw, seconded by Councilmember Joy's motion for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation per what's written on your agenda. So if the motion is clear, if in favor of the motion for approval of the plan tonight, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are Councilmembers Shaw, Gulick, Joy, Cole, Boyette, and Rupsis. Which got us to 6, I believe. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Neese, Owen, Kennedy, Aspenleiter, and Tidswell. So the motion does pass narrowly, and we'll have further discussions on, I'm sure, what was discussed tonight. That concludes item number 2 and brings to item number 3. So Denise, would you please read item number 3?
Public hearing and resolution rescinding and repealing Resolution 90-16317, exempting property located within Hogan Homestead subdivision. Staff recommends approval.
I'm missing part of the screen, is that? Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight's item here is to rescind a 1990 resolution that exempted property within Hogan Homestead subdivision from storm sewer assessments. This item was on the March 11th council meeting. Prior to that meeting, we had sent out a letter to all property owners in the district or in the subdivision. And the HOA president contacted us and asked if we could extend the time that we allowed them to have a chance to meet with us. She said that she had gotten calls from many property owners in the subdivision, and some were out of state and just didn't have the chance to meet with us. So we did open up the public hearing on March 11th, and we are continuing it tonight. So generally, Hogan Homestead subdivision is located south of King Avenue West and east of 24th Street South. You can see the boundary there within the pink, and there's blue within that map, and that blue is all of the subdivision's internal storm system that they own and maintain. But they do discharge to Hogan Slough, which is managed by the city. So back in 1990, there were three basic ideas that went into the resolution as to why they exempted this subdivision from storm fees. The first was that Hogan Homestead at that time did not discharge stormwater into any of the city's storm sewer system. And like I just said, they do have an internal storm system that is maintained by and at the expense of property owners in that subdivision. And lastly, the city incurred no annual cost of maintenance or capital replacement or did any other activities relating to storm drainage. So today, only the middle one is true, where yes, they still do own and operate and maintain that storm system that's internal to them. But they are like every other subdivision in the city, where they retain stormwater on site and only the excess goes into the city's storm drain system. So we had a meeting with the HOA president, and I think it was about 5 or 6 property owners back on March 22nd. And in that meeting, they brought up what their concerns were. Number one, they disagreed that we did any kind of maintenance in the area. And we asked them about street sweepers, as that's part of storm maintenance. And they said that they had never seen a sweeper in the area. So we committed to looking at our AVL system, which tells us which sweepers have been where and what time and what date. So this is a print screen of that system showing that we do indeed sweep that area. I also talked with Street and Traffic, the superintendent, after that meeting to just confirm that we do other storm maintenance in the area. We do clean inlets. They do get several calls during big rain events asking us to come over there and unplug some of the inlets. So we do all the regular storm maintenance in the area that we do for other subdivisions. So we are still asking council to recommend repealing the resolution. The first reason that we're asking is because, like I said, all subdivisions are required to retain stormwater on site. They're no different than anyone else, other than they don't pay for anything right now. Second, city has maintenance responsibility for Hogan Slough at this point, and the city has maintenance responsibility within the subdivision. So we do incur our own costs in that subdivision for storm. The next item is that we consider streets part of the storm system. It's a major conveyance of storm. All properties in the city are charged for storm regardless of what they have in front of their property because they drive on streets in Billings. So everyone is driving these streets across Billings to get to these businesses in that area, but none of the businesses actually pay any storm fees right now. So this is the only subdivision that is currently exempt from storm fees. And right now, other properties within the city of Billings are actually subsidizing Hogan Homestead because they're not paying. We totally recognize that the homeowners or the property owners in the district, they're angry. They don't want this switch to happen. I wouldn't want it to happen either, but they have enjoyed something that they probably should have not enjoyed for many years, in that they have not been paying for the services that they receive. So the final question in that meeting was, so you want us to pay money for no increase in service? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is yes, because they have not been paying for their services to date. Yeah, that was it for.
That's a pretty straightforward summary. Okay, questions for Jennifer? This is a public hearing, and we'll get to that in just a second. Is there any questions for Jennifer? Okay, I don't see any. Jennifer, we'll potentially have questions for you later. This is a public hearing. Item number 3, the proposal to rescind Resolution 90-16317 exempting Hogan Homestead subdivision from those stormwater fees. Would anybody like to comment? Please come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any public comment, any comments on item number 3? Before I close the public hearing, this is a public hearing. No one's coming forward. Still no one is coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing. Back to council. Council, further questions or discussion or motions? Councilmember Ripsis, you had your hand up?
Sure. I'll go ahead and put the motion on the table. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution rescinding and repealing Resolution 90-16317 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Enthusiastic.
Thanks, Ed. He gets the second and the third on that, I guess. Okay, discussion. Would either of you like to speak to your motions or second? Okay, any other discussion? Any other discussion? Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, I apologize. I actually do have a question for Jennifer.
Jennifer?
So you met with, you said the board chair and a few property owners, but didn't do like a presentation to the board or anything. Is that right?
Correct. The HOA president represented herself as the one that was representing the district.
Was the conversation as black and white as you represented it? You said, we kind of need you guys to pay. They said, we really don't want to, and we kind of all walked away. Or were there discussions of things that might be more tolerable, like a phase in over time? Or was there any kind of give and take?
There was no discussions over any kind of give and take because we felt like that would actually cost the rest of the city ongoing costs. Now that we know about the situation, we felt like we should try to rectify it. The basics, actually most of the conversation revolved around explaining to them how that they were not different from others. That's what they came in with, mostly thinking that because they had that internal storm system that they shouldn't be paying. So it was really getting to the bottom of that. Is what we spent most of the time on.
Maybe I should have asked my question differently. Did they have any suggested solutions other than just not paying?
They did not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rapslider.
Yeah, thanks. And this is kind of a conversation that Director Melling and I had, and maybe my question will be for Director Melling. I'm in full support of this, and I talked to a couple of those landowners, and I think they understand. Some of those that are in, prominent members of our community in the development community, I think they get it. This is a dysfunctional HOA that maybe is kind of represented by one person, but doesn't communicate with the rest of the property owners. So there's a little disconnect, and that's on the HOA. That's the property owner's responsibility. But my question maybe for Debbie is, they do have this internal system, and it amounts to a lot of ponds. And those ponds, generally speaking, if you talk to a lot of those members out there, are not clean, they're not maintained, there hasn't been anything done with them since they've been built. Like, eventually, those are gonna be a part of our problem as well. Are we taking over responsibility for those, or how are we gonna deal with that in the future?
So I'll start first because they talked about the maintenance that they do on the ponds. They indicated, and maybe we should be checking into this so that we can see what kind of liability we have out there in the future, but they indicated they spend, I think their number was close to $70,000 a year on maintenance of those ponds and cleaning them.
I would just add that the subdivisions in the city of Billings that come in now are required to maintain their own ponds. So we have, almost every subdivision comes in with a pond or a water quality device of some kind. They have to maintain their own.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? We have a motion for approval. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, motion is for approval of item 3, consistent with the proposed language on the agenda. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4A, item 4A. Denise, would you read item 4A, please?
Yes, this is regarding SID 1425 Brosco Park and Gable Road traffic signal. It's a public hearing and resolution creating this SID Staff recommends approval.
Okay, Mayor and Council, this should be pretty quick. This is SID 1425, which is Broso Park Drive and Gable Road. A lot of you are probably familiar with the area. Of course, Gable and Zoo, you go about 800 feet north of there. It's where the gas station is on the east side of the road, and it's the street that comes out just north of there. So this is the district boundary. It's all the property owners that are basically west of Gable Road, north of Zoo. The total project cost is $540,000. There are 38 parcels, which I showed you on that last one. The SIA was very clear when this developed in 2002 that all of the property owners in this area would pay 1/2 of the cost of that signal. So it specifically says it in the SIA. That is what's included here, so 1/2 of the cost of the installation of the signal. And then 1/2 to be borne by the city at this point. However, when the west side of this develops, we will ask for that back as a condition of development on that west side. The assessment to each parcel is about 7 cents per square foot. This was done on a square foot basis. We went through and looked at the types of use of each of these properties. It seemed to be the fairest way of all those that are offered to us. So the average parcel cost is $7,600. In addition to the signal, we're widening Gable Road 800 feet. So from that intersection of the signal all the way up through Zoo will be widened, so there's a straight through lane. So right now, anybody that's driven that understands there's it's kind of a mess since a recent business came in there. And so, and it was bad before, but we did get a cash contribution of about $116,000 from Costco in order to improve that intersection. We're using that to widen the lanes. And then also, it'll help with the stacking and that through traffic. So some improvements beyond just the signal. The resolution of intent to create was done on March 25th. Tonight is the resolution to create. Again, we're doing this a little bit different than we used to do because of the construction costs, and we're not very good at estimating sometimes anymore with the changes we've seen. So we actually bid it in February, so these are exact costs instead of an estimate. So these are the costs that were bid. We'll start construction and then hopefully finish that in the fall. That is it.
Okay, any questions for Debbie? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, this other half that the city has to pay and then we recoup it when it's built, is there going to be any inflation increase in what's going to have to be recouped in 10, 15 years when they have to repay it?
I'm looking at our finance person and she says no. I'm not sure we have the ability to charge interest on it, but do you want to speak to that at all?
I would say probably not, but we'll look at it. I don't know how it was written.
Okay, so that's how the whole subdivision was written, not that because the other one it must already be in the city then?
I don't think it is. During annexation, we might be able to.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, because right now, we'd look at sewage or the sewer water, stuff like that, as whatever, I think you came up with a policy of whatever the current cost is. I would suggest something, the similar type of a reimbursement.
If they haven't annexed, our rule's a little bit different, so we'll look
Right.
at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to second the value of, or the issue of the time value of money and interest on these things. The developer who gets in late is always in a lot better shape. Construction inflation is typically over the last 20 years run at almost double the rate of regular inflation, using very skilled labor, materials. And so that can be a real issue. So I would encourage us to look, see what kind of interest, whatever you want to call it, factor we can work into our SIAs. Other discussion on item number 4A, or questions for Debbie, I guess. I guess we don't have a motion before us. Is there a motion on this item, Councilmember Aspenleiter? Oh, I apologize. You're right. Thank you very much. We'll get back to any questions for Debbie, but let's have a public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to comment on item 4A, SID 1425, Broso Park and Gable Road traffic signal? Any public comment at all on item 4A? This is a public hearing. This is a public hearing. No one is coming forward. 4A, we'll close it. Now, Councilmember Aspenleiter, Councilmember Kennedy?
So I'll make the motion
having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve resolution creating SID 1425 as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to second.
Councilmember Kennedy with a second. Now, discussion. Anybody like to speak their motion or other down at the other?
I would.
Councilmember Kennedy.
I just have to say, that's a terrible intersection. It should have never been put in that way. We should have had some type of signaling there, so I'm glad we're finally taking care of it. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions for Debbie before we proceed to a vote? Okay, I don't see any. The motion is for approval of item 4A. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Denise, would you read item 4B?
Bid award for SID 1425 Rosso Park and Gable traffic signal. It was opened on 2/20/2024. Staff recommends Montana Lines Incorporated.
Thank you very much. Back to Debbie, is there a presentation on this? There is not. So you have in your packet the recommended bid award on the same project. Is there any questions for staff or motion? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve the bid award SID 1425 to Montana Lines Inc. as recommended by staff.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Joy, second by Councilmember Neese for approval. Item 4B, bid award Montana Lines Inc. Any discussion or questions for staff? Seeing none, and this is not a public hearing, so we'll proceed to a vote. Motion is for approval. Item 4B. If in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion also passes unanimously. That concludes item 4. Council, it's 7:21. We can take we got 3 more items. We can take a quick break. I don't think we're going to get through all 3 items without any sort of break. Nicole, can you get through this in 9 minutes or so? Not sure. Okay. Yeah, no pressure. Okay, let's just take a break now, and we'll come back. We won't be under any gun. Council, it's 7:21. Let's be back before 7:30, and we will continue with item 5.
for zone change 1049 located at 1911 and 1915 8th Avenue North. The Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria.
Very good. Nicole?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is two lots adjacent to each other near the intersection of 8th Avenue North and North 19th Street. Current zoning of the parcels is NX1 for the 1911 parcel and N1 for 1915. The NX1 parcel at 1911 has a 6-unit apartment building on the property already. And 1915 is now a vacant parcel. It used to have a tiny little house at the back of the lot, which was demolished recently. And so this parcel is ready for infill. The proposal is to go to mixed residential 2, NX2, to allow 2 to 8 unit buildings on the parcels that have at least 50 feet of street frontage. So 2 to 8 unit buildings would be allowed. It provides conforming with zoning to the 1911 parcel because that's currently non-conforming because it has 6 units in a building. NX1 only allows 1 to 4 units. Of course, home occupations and accessory buildings are allowed. It's 50 feet of street frontage for each primary structure with more than 2 units in it. And off-street parking, landscaping, and buffer yards, street trees would be required for any new construction. Here's the parcel. So it's one lot west of the corner property. We have N1 is most of the rest of the block there between 8th and 9th and 19th to 22nd. North Park is directly across the street. We have mixed residential 3 to the south and east. We have NX1 throughout this area of North Park. Of course, we have Head Start at 6th Avenue North. We have one little parcel at the corner of 22nd and 8th Avenue North that's neighborhood office. So, and there's just a lot of mixed zoning in the neighborhood that gives it a good sustainability and resilience. And, okay, the clicker was working. So the existing development at 1911, you can see that in the aerial, and then the vacant parcel directly to the west. Same owners. They'd like to duplicate what they've done at 1911 on 1915. The Zoning Commission is recommending approval of the zone change. They believe it meets the growth policy, the infill policy, and the North Park neighborhood plan. Adjacent uses and zoning are compatible with the proposed zoning. It's located near many neighborhood services and the downtown. And the new development on 1915 would require a buffer yard adjacent to property to the north and to the west, and installation of street trees. And finishing the street frontage, I believe there's no sidewalk in front of 1915. Here's the existing property. If you're standing on the line between the two lots, and you can see the back of the apartment building at 1911. And if you look straight to the north, this is the vacant parcel at 1915. Then directly south at North Park. And then south and east to the parcel that's zoned NX3. And then up the driveway of the apartment building at 1911. Here are the zone change criteria. The findings of the Zoning Commission are in your staff report. Again, the zoning map and the aerial map, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Questions? Councilmember Kulik.
Thank you. Nicole, you mentioned that NX2 zoning has a street frontage requirement. Does that require like entrances to the units, dwelling units, to be facing the street then?
Not necessarily. It does have requirements that there be an entry door that faces the street, but only for the unit that's on the very end of the building would that be a requirement. There's some other facade elements as far as minimum door and window on the ground floor that would have to be considered. So it may not be exactly the same building, but it will be similar in style.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Nicole? Any other questions for Nicole? Councilmember Nice?
Nicole, you mentioned they're going to duplicate what they did on the other lot. And I can understand, going to Annex 2 on the one, but how many stories can you go on Annex 2?
I believe the Annex 2 has the same story height limit that Annex 3 has, which is 4 stories.
So they're going to have some type of buffer or offset off of that property to the north, but they could go 4 stories on that northern boundary next to the.
They could, but it's hard to imagine an 8-unit building that's 4 stories tall. So 8 units is the maximum number of units you can have in a structure. So it would have to be a very small building and very tall. A footprint that's just has 2 dwelling units on the ground floor.
Or really big apartments.
Right.
Yeah, okay, and then I think there's no parking requirements on this, is that correct?
There is parking required.
Okay.
So that's 1.5 per unit.
That's still in force right now?
That's still in effect, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Nicole? Any other questions for Nicole before we have a public hearing? Okay, thank you, Nicole. This is a public hearing on item number 5, zone change 1049, 911, and 1911 and 1915 8th Avenue North. Anybody like to comment? Please come forward. Just ask to keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Willems. I live at 817 North 19th Street. I can see the existing structure from my living room. The neighbor directly across the street, the existing structure is all but in his backyard. There was a neighborhood meeting for this. It's my understanding that there were 3 neighbors that came and spoke more or less in opposition to the planned zoning change. And I think there were only 3 neighbors there because that meeting was held at 5:15 in the afternoon on a Thursday when most people were just returning from work. And so I think it's a little bit unfair to give any kind of credence to the neighbors' opposition to that particular meeting. The one individual that has spoken out more than anybody, I think, is the one that lives directly behind where they're talking about building a buffer zone. And if they're planning on reproducing anything resembling what is currently there, there's no room for off-street parking, for a buffer zone, for a 4-car or 6-car parking garage, or whatever kind of structure you want to call that, and then a 6-unit apartment complex that has 2 bedrooms in each unit. So the space thing is part of the issue. The current structure, if it's not the biggest building in the neighborhood, it's really close. It is a 2.5-story structure, bigger than my house and garage combined. To put that in perspective, I have an 820 square foot house with a 800 square foot detached garage. I would say probably about 80% of the current developed lot is completely, like there's some sort of artificial surface on it. There's very little grass. I think there's 2 trees. And so that's kind of the I hesitate to call it an eyesore, but the eyesore problem with one of these giant complexes. The next issue that I think is really important here is that area has always, as long as I've lived there, which is since 2011, so it's not like I've lived there for 2 years and I'm trying to stop something from happening. Since I've lived there since 2011, the issue really has been traffic and parking. The city is currently trying innovative approaches to mitigate some of that traffic. They're not working. Traffic circles that are more of an obstruction, curb abutments that do the same thing. We can't drive dual-wheel trucks next to each other down that street anymore. And this is precisely the location where we're debating putting 6 more housing units that is a street removed from a proposal that would put 20 more housing units in that very same area. On one corner, very close, there is a business that's a church that's very well attended 3 nights a week. Anybody wants to see the real problem, come by on Thursday and I will show you the parking problem that causes. I do have more, but if that's
If you want to just do a little quick wrap up, feel free, but if you would keep it short.
I really think the issues here are parking, the giant complex that they're proposing, and it just really, even the one that's there, doesn't fit with the neighborhood. It just really doesn't. I don't know how better to express that other than go look, just drive down that street. You will know exactly what building we're talking about because it's different than every other building in the area. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Any other comment? This is a public hearing on item number 5.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Gentry and my wife, excuse me, Melissa is here. We own the existing sixplex and the adjacent lot that we're proposing to do something similar on. The gentleman that just shared his testimony there, not entirely true on the public comment session. The 3 neighbors that showed up were completely in support of the unit on adding affordable housing units to the area. The existing sixplex that's there meets the neighborhood, the zone requirements, as Nicole mentioned. It's a great fit for the neighborhood. We always have it full, so we're providing affordable housing for that area. As far as off-street parking, we meet the 1.5 times we would on the second one, so I feel it'd be a great fit for that neighborhood. I just want to share that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the developer? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, any other public comment? Any other public comment on item number 5 before I close the public comment period? Okay, please, if there's anybody else, make a little line.
Hi, Michelle Harkins, 1213 Poly Drive. I just wanted to come up and say that Melissa and her husband have a few properties in that area and in the Eberg, and they've been doing a lot to kind of help with low-income housing and produce all of that. So I just want to stand up here and support their project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item number 5? No one's coming forward. We'll close the public hearing. Back to council. Council, any further questions for staff or motions or discussion? Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance for zone change 1049 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the zoning commission.
Okay, second by Councilmember Shaw. Did either of you want to speak to your motion? Then I'll turn it to Councilmember Kennedy.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I think we're all acutely aware of the need for more housing in our community, and developing in a place where we already have the infrastructure. So infill housing is also a priority. This is a neighborhood that, I appreciate the points that were made by a gentleman who's a neighbor in terms of, there wouldn't be as much green space, but we do have a park right across the street. I think I appreciate that our zoning ordinances do have changed requiring to have entrance facing the street. That is better from a SEPTED perspective in terms of eyes on the street. I'm not terribly concerned from the traffic perspective because residential traffic tends to it's not an event driven where everyone leaves at one time. And so I think I'm in support of this project.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw. Thank you, Councilmember Kennedy.
Nicole, I have a question for you. Is there adequate parking, or are people going to have to park up and down the length of the street there?
Well, 1.5 spaces per unit in a 6-unit building is 9 off-street parking spaces minimum. So usually 9 is enough. Streets like this street are exceptionally wide, and there is parking lanes on both sides. From what I understand, those parking spaces are intermittently used depending on what's happening at North Park. So if people have 2 cars and they're renting an apartment, they may have to park one of those on the streets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I see a need for more affordable housing. This is a neighborhood that has, some other higher density units just down the street from it. I really don't like to see neighborhoods change so much from an Annex 2 when you got just single family homes right next door. I'd prefer to see this something as Annex 1, a little bit more of a transitional type of housing need, but I know it doesn't meet the need of the developer developing. So I am just concerned about when we start changing some of the neighborhoods, how it impacts that neighborhood's character. I like to see neighborhoods stay a little more as they were, but this was a single-family home that was torn down, wasn't used, and now I hope that when they do develop it, that they maybe don't put it in the backyard of their neighbor, but maybe to the north, but hopefully put it to their south near their current building where it's not going to really impact the neighbors as much. So, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilor Ripsis?
Nicole, real quick, the zoning code update we discussed just last week, isn't it pretty much a state standard now that multi-unit buildings will now have 1 parking space required?
Yes.
So it's not going to be 1.5 anymore. Will this project be required to be 1 or 1.5?
Right.
Okay.
But not every developer is going to choose the minimum.
Sure. But they won't be required to have 9 spaces. They'll be required to have a minimum of 6.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gillick?
This would be not to comment, more general comment for planning in our city. With the very wide streets that we have in the North Park neighborhood as well as the south side, any opportunity we have to do diagonal parking on the streets and minimizing off-street parking, I would encourage. And so that also narrows the apparent width of the street and slows traffic. I think that's just a win-win-win that can be happening too. So, and I guess to Councilmember Neese's point, I think it's important to allow neighborhoods to incrementally change, not to just have one big massive change, but just to slowly grow and change in different ways. And this project seems to be consistent with that. Thank you.
Very good. Any other discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval before we proceed to a vote. Last call. Okay, we'll move to a vote. The motion is for approval of item 5. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Councilmember Kennedy voting in opposition, all other council members voting in favor. So the motion passes 10-1. And that concludes item 5. Item 6. Denise, would you read item number 6?
Public hearing and first reading ordinance for zone change 1050, located at 5403 Hawk Creek Avenue. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 review criteria.
Nicole, your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a property that's at the intersection of Hawk Creek Avenue and 54th Street West, just to the north of the intersection with Grand Avenue. Its current zoning is neighborhood mixed use. This was a corollary zone to the previous zone of neighborhood commercial. So when we updated the zoning map in 2021, this went from neighborhood commercial to neighborhood mixed use. So neighborhood mixed use is a little different from our neighborhood commercial zone in that it is intended to be in a neighborhood corridor, highly walkable and accessible from all modes, but more walkable than drivable necessarily. Corner stores, personal services, and small eateries are the focus of neighborhood mixed use. Special review is required for food service drive-throughs, hotels, motels, commercial greenhouses, and other retail drive-through services. Use is not allowed under the current zoning or any multifamily of more than 8 units in a structure, long-term care, outpatient surgery, casinos, bars, funeral homes, craft alcohol, general retail, and auto-oriented uses. The commercial corridor mixed use 1 is intended to be on a transportation corridor. So 54th Street West is an arterial street. It is a transportation corridor. It's more accessible, leaning towards vehicle access rather than pedestrian access, but it can serve both. It is appropriate in places where you have directly adjacent neighborhood zone districts. Whereas corridor mixed use 2 is intended to be for much larger parcels that are separated from neighborhood zones by at least a street width. It does allow larger scale retail and personal services, more flexible than a neighborhood mixed use, and some auto-oriented services are allowed. Multifamily, more than 8 units in a structure is also allowed. Special review and minimum separations would apply for casinos and bars. The only potential use that could be on this parcel under the corridor mixed use 1 would be a bar, and that would only be on the south half of the property, farthest away from the neighborhood zoning to the north. A bar is different than a restaurant that serves alcohol. A bar is a place that makes more revenue from service of alcohol than it does from service of food. So there's a difference there. It still requires special review for food service on a drive-through whenever that parcel shares a property line with a neighborhood zone district. So they're not getting out of the special review requirement for a food service drive-through unless they divide the property and put that drive-through on the southern parcel that is not adjoining the neighborhood zone to the north. Uses that are not allowed in the neighborhood mixed use are generally allowed in the corridor mixed use 1 zone district. The intent of the zone is to allow some of those additional uses in corridor mixed use 1 as the property owner markets a long-term lease and build to suit for the parcel. And there we go. Directly to the west is the Hawk Creek Planned Development Zone, which is the Diamond X Beer Company. To the north is the Cottonwood Grove subdivision, and that's zone neighborhood 2. To the south is a vacant parcel that's corridor mixed use 2, which is recently been purchased, I believe, by First Interstate Bank, and they are planning a new bank down at the corner there of Grand and 54th. To the south and west is corridor mixed use 2, and that's the Den and Back 9 bar. To the west of the Den is another neighborhood mixed use zone that correlates with the previous neighborhood commercial zone. That is vacant right now. To the east is Fire Station 7 and corridor mixed use 2, which is the new Albertsons grocery store and drive-through pharmacy. On the bulk of that property, there are several outlots on that parcel in front of Albertsons that have not been sold, or concept plans have not been presented for those parcels. Not sure what will happen with those, but it'll be complementary uses that you see at other Albertsons stores. Here's a subject property aerial. So it shows you there's a lot of development in the area. This parcel will not have direct access from 54th Street West. There is a no access strip along the entire east property line. The only access for the uses on the parcel will be from Hawk Creek Avenue. The Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing and is recommending approval of the zone change. They believe that it meets the growth policy, the infill policy, and the West Billings neighborhood plan. The corridor mixed-use 1 zoning is intended to be compatible with adjacent neighborhood uses. And adjacent uses and zoning are compatible with the proposed zoning, as it has commercial zoning to the south, the east, and the west, and it has neighborhood zoning to the north. Part of this subdivision also has a 25-foot landscape buffer that's platted all across the northern property lines of this parcel and the ones to the west. Depending on the development of the property, that north buffer yard would have to be beefed up, would have to have additional trees planted in it to provide additional buffering to any of those new uses. Here's a subject property if you're looking north from Hawk Creek Avenue to the neighborhood of Cottonwood Grove. Looking to the west at the beer company. Looking south and east to the intersection of 54th Street West and Grand Avenue. Directly east to the new Albertsons across 54th. The Den to the south and west. Here are your zone change criteria. The Zoning Commission's findings are in your staff report. And again, here is the zoning map and the aerial, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Questions for Nicole? Councilmember Boyette?
Nicole, I'm always talking about parking, but I go by there a lot, and those streets are already packed. Some days the cars are already parked up that road off of 54th, all the way up to 54th. They're just solid cars going into that brewery or whatever it is. How would another business cope with that if they're going to bring another brewery in when there's no parking now?
Well, I think that there is a certain expectation, and all of the streets in this subdivision are private. So they've built them to meet the ability to have traffic lanes, travel lanes, and parking on both sides of the street. If the property owners disagree about the use of parking on the streets, I'm sure that they can get together and resolve that issue. We apply the minimum standard based on the use. The brewery, just because it is a brewery and then it added a restaurant and it has a bar, and it has its own planned development agreement, has specific requirements for off-street parking that wouldn't apply in the other parcels in the subdivision. If this parcel wanted to, they could offer to the beer company to say, hey, you can use some of our parking during the day or during the night when our business is closed. That's acceptable. It's within 400 feet. The beer company has what they said was going to be an overflow parking or a parking area just for deliveries. And it's a full-on parking lot, but it's gravel, which I see that, some of the other property owners in that subdivision will probably eventually ask the beer company to improve that with pavement and parking, striping and all that. So probably doesn't answer your question directly, but because these are private roads, they're all managed by the adjacent property owners.
Nicole, on that question, do you know if even if they're technically different LLCs, it's the same ownership between the east lot and the west lot?
The subject property is owned by a company, and the beer company lots are owned by the beer company. So they are two different corporations. The FIB owns the lot at the corner, the Den owns the lot in the middle, and I think Kramer still owns the last lot on Grand Avenue.
Yeah, no, and I understand. I was just wondering if there was the same actual people who control those two lots to the north. No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilmember Deese?
Thank you, Mayor. Nicole, if we look at this and start, you said there's a no, you can't get into that Hawk Creek Road going left, I think, you can't left turn in there, you can't right turn in across the entire eastern side of the border. So the only way they're going to get in there is through Hawk Creek, but they can't turn left into that, right? Or is that going to change?
I mean, it's a 3/4 intersection. So that when you're going out
When
to
you're
the
going
east.
south, when you're going north on 54th, are you going to be able to turn left into Hawk Creek? They're going to change that so that they can,
Yeah,
all right.
you can now. You can now.
Okay, all right. It looks to me like it's blocked off that you can't turn left there, but that's fine. So when it comes time for putting up, when it gets so busy and putting street lights up at some of these intersections, like on, is it Chai Way over there because that's going to be more and more business and more traffic are these owners going to then have to pay for these street lights, or the city going to have to do that, or what's the?
You mean the signals?
I'm sorry?
Signals? at
The
those
signals, right.
Right, if they're warranted. A traffic study was done for this subdivision, the first filing and second filing, and I think that there were assessments already charged to the lot owners at the time based on their proportionate share of contribution to the traffic on 54th or Grand. I don't believe that they would put a second signal that close to 54th and Grand. It's really not that far away. And if the signal timing is done correctly, there should be moments between that signal change that would allow people to make safe left turn movements, either into Hawk Creek Avenue or out of Hawk Creek Avenue. So that's the whole intent there. I think that if there is a reassessment of that traffic study and it finds that there be more contribution from the actual uses, then the city engineering may say, we need more money, or you need to contribute more to those intersection improvements.
Okay, I think that answers my question, because I think as this develops now, it's something different, it may generate more traffic, but that will be taken care of through the process, and if you have to have signals or more things, that the city will make sure the property owners are paying for that, not the city.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Nicole? Any other questions for Nicole? Okay, don't go away. This is a public hearing on item number 6, zone change 1050, 5403 Hawk Creek Avenue. If you'd like to be heard, please come forward. And Nicole, do we have a presentation by the developer?
She doesn't have a separate presentation.
Okay, but I just want to make sure the developer has an opportunity.
Let the tech.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon or evening, sorry. Anna Vickers with IMEG, 175 North 27th Street. I'm here on behalf of the property owner, which is Mountain West Capital. To reiterate Nicole's comments, which thank you, Nicole, for your always thorough job. Mountain West is not the same owners as the brewery, Diamond X, so I just wanted to make sure that that's very clear. I know that there was a rezoning that Diamond X requested that was pretty contentious, so I prepared pretty heavily whenever I was doing the required pre-application meeting with the neighborhood. So a couple of things I wanted to bring up is we're requesting this just to kind of expand the build to lease opportunities for that particular lot, so the owner can just have a little bit more to market it for. It's always a little tough when you own a property, so that's the intent of this actual rezoning. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the casino is not allowed on this property. The width of the property is 303 feet, and per zoning regulations, you have to be 350 feet away from a neighborhood zoning. Lastly, the bar, she already mentioned that, 150 feet. Sorry, this won't be my last because traffic was something that Councilman Neese brought up, but Traffic is actually per the SIA agreement from the underlying MK subdivision. It's allowed a right-in only from 54th Street, so it is a no-access strip, as Nicole mentioned, but within the SIA agreement, it does say that it's a right-in only to kind of keep traffic calm right there. The other thing is that the traffic impact study that was done for the subdivision required that the contribution be made at the time of building permit, which was around $119,000. Per our city's regulations, it's my understanding that any sort of queuing that would happen could trigger another traffic impact study specific to that kind of commercial development as well. So there could be an additional fee that would be done for that. That's pretty much all I had on this topic. Thank you.
Excuse me, you want to, just a second, any questions for the developer's representative? Councilor Bernice?
Yeah, Mayor, I think at the time when we were looking at the Diamond X, at the time there was the requirement to make sure that that pathway along the back was built, and I don't think that's done yet across this property. So will that be required? Will you be building that trail from 54th across the back street of the property?
Are you talking about the portion that's in that landscape buffer, or is there another trail?
Yeah, there's a landscape buffer.
Oh,
There's
so
a
the
trail there.
landscape buffer, based on my understanding, and I'll say that I'm not an attorney, but based on what I understand in the SIA agreement, is that the entire subdivision is on the hook for building that, and they all have it in control of a title company, and that it will be executed at a certain point. And that point is not determined based on anything I can find at the clerk and recorder's office at this point. I don't know when that group of subdivision owners would do it. But I do know during our building permit process, we're required to meet any sort of landscaping requirements that are for the development itself.
Thank you. I'll ask that question to Nicole. Maybe she can.
Okay. So Nicole, you want to come up and explain the kind of the legal basis for the 25-foot buffer specific, I suppose, is that in the SIA or some other?
Specifically the trail that was supposed to have been.
Yeah, and I don't recall a trail, but maybe you can work that out. Is there such a thing? I just remember landscaping, but I don't remember. So I don't know where it would go to exactly.
I'm looking at Councilmember Aspenleiter because I think he has more experience with it, having been an author of the plan development for Diamond X. So as Anna stated, there is no trigger for the building of that pathway, but I would assume that it happens as those lots are built out. But I will defer to Councilmember Aspenleiter.
If he remembers what's in the SIA or whatever defines that, he can comment, sure.
I do, because I modified it 5 times at least, I think, with this council. To cut to the short of it, when they go to develop this property, the city staff at Public Works will require the construction of that trail on the backside on that lot. There's some ambiguity, as Ms. Vickers noted, about all of the properties being responsible for it. I think the way that it has been interpreted and the way that at least Diamond X did it was that they were responsible for building it when they drew their building permit. And that, I would imagine, would be exactly what happens with this property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for staff? This is a public, well, before I come back to you, Council, let me just find out if there's any other public comment. This is a public hearing on item number 6. Anybody else like to comment on item number 6? Zone change 1050. Any other comment? This is a public hearing. No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing. Now back to council. Any further questions or motions, council? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We will move this meeting along. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance of zone change 1050 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the Zoning Commission.
Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Motion by Councilmember Joy. Would either of you like to speak to your motion or second?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, as at council, we very often get to approve zone changes without having an exact idea of what those changes will bring. But this is developing as a commercial node, and that's really what the West End plan. As it gets updated, that may change, but that's really what is intended. So it's consistent with our land use and our planning for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Tiswell? No? Okay, any other discussion? Any other discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval of item number 6. Before we proceed to a vote, no one's raising their hand, so we will vote. Item number 6, motion is for approval. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, Denise, would you read item number 7?
Tax increment financing assistance from the East Billings Urban Renewal District, eBird, to 1889 Brewing Company, LLC, for redevelopment costs up to a maximum reimbursement of $40,837.16 as recommended by the Bird District Board.
Good night, City Council and Mr. Mayor. How are y'all doing? Hope well. Sorry to keep you so long, but I'm Michelle Harkins. I'm here on behalf of the Bird, the Billings Industrial Revitalization District, representing 1889 Brewing Co., Matt and Lindsay Miller. So an overview of the project, 1889 Brewery will be located at 204 North 13th Street. And the plan is to take the existing steel building that's there and renovate it to provide a brewery and tap room for the area. The current state of the project, it used to be a paintless dent repair shop. And they are not purchasing the building, but they have gotten permission, and I've talked to the property owner, and they're very excited about this project. And as Matt and Lindsay say, the 1889 Brewing Company is a family-owned and ran beer manufacturer and taproom, drafting inspiration from the vibrant history of Montana with a mission to craft exceptional high-quality beers that pay homage to the remarkable landscapes and fascinating stories that make Montana so special. Okay. So the project entails demolition of all the existing interior structures, and they're going to build that out, having ADA bathrooms and making everything compliant and accessible. The exterior improvements will include a fix to the facade, new concrete pads, but majority of it's going to be putting in a city sidewalk that is currently not from the east to the west side of the property. It's not in existence. Doing a new and then they're also going to be doing security updates, lighting updates, and then we're going to be updating the electrical going from the service to the outside of the building as well. And they will be doing a new approach to get into the building to fit code. The request is that the Bird recommends to City Council a TIF reward of $40,837.16 towards the improvement, resulting in 13.58% of the total project cost of $664,018. This becomes a 7-to-1 private investment to TIF funds request. Like I said before, city of sidewalk and approach, electrical upgrades, landscaping, fencing, facade, and security. This meets a lot with the eBird master plan to infill, increase economic growth, revitalization, and community growth and impact in the area. Here's the project by the numbers. I don't know why that's messed up there, but out of the total project, they would be doing private investment for $252,827. And like mentioned above, most of it will be going to the electrical upgrades, the sidewalk that's not there for the city portion, and other security and lighting upgrades to the building. Was our strong focus this time. So if you look where the big red pin is, that is where the proposed location for the 1889 Brewing Company is. It is located on the Birds, the eBirds Main Street on 13th Avenue. So it'll bring more life and rejuvenate the area, but it is located, number 1, you can see down the list, we have 406 Lawn, Red Ox Store, the manufacturing, Better Together events, Toucan, Undammed, and Mr. Thrifty. That's all in that area. A lot of them are going through renovations or have been TIF projects. All right, so I will answer any questions you all might have for me. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Great to see things happening in eBird. Councilmember Owen?
Thank you. You may not know the answer to this, so if we need to defer to when the project sponsors speak, that's fine. But I'm guessing this is kind of a bootstrap, you know, putting their money into this, but the design that was shown up there is not very septetty.
No.
It
so-
doesn't give us a whole lot more windows or eyes on the street, so I'm wondering if there's been any discussion of like maybe outdoor patio or something to that effect that would put more visual eyes on the street.
Yes, so there is more windows going into the building. What slide is on? And they are improving the door and the garage in the back. We are doing lighting upgrades to the property as well and landscaping. So a lot of those things fit into the SEPDED. So we will be helping with the window replacement and door replacement and stuff to actually bring more light into the building.
But no outdoor seating.
Oh, they are doing an outdoor patio on the back. It's behind a big garage door. When you go to the alley, there's a huge garage door in the back, if you can see. Mr. Thrifty's in the rear, and they'll have a patio placed out there. Is that?
And it looks like we've got Matt and Lindsay. If they would like to come forward, please do. This is your project, so. Can you comment on that question?
I can actually. So for the patio area, it's actually more along the lines where that cement pad is kind of in that picture. The idea behind that is to re-pour that, kind of have a security fencing around that. And then we're also looking at possibly putting up kind of like a pergola and then having hops grow up above it to kind of provide shade because that is southern exposure. And we know how it gets pretty hot in the summer in the south. And then as for signage, we're also looking at doing a flag mount sign right at the corner of 13th and 2nd. That states brewery to kind of show visualization as to where it actually is. Maybe the text will probably be facing the other way because the way that this building sits back, it'd be kind of hard to see that from either of the streets. And then, like Michelle said, adjusting all the windows to be basically they won't be able to be open, but they'll allow more light to it. The front retail doors will have a lot more glass to them than they do now. So.
Okay, thank you. You want to add something to that, Michelle?
Oh, yes. And for facade work to improve the building, they're also doing some metal coating on the bottom and painting the building. So.
Yeah, we're to do kind of a metal wainscoting along about 4 feet up, and then we'll change the color of the building as well to kind of brighten it up.
Great. Matt and Lindsay, is there anything else you want to tell us about your project or anything else in the way of sort of a mini presentation? No obligation, but you're welcome to.
No, I think our only comment would be that we're just really excited to get started and kind of be one of the businesses that's watching from the ground up as the eBird really starts to revitalize that area and get going on some of the projects we've seen in the master plan. And it's sort of why we fell in love with the area. So we're just really excited to get started.
Very good. Any other comment or questions for our developer or for Michelle? Councilmember Denise and Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. This is for you, Michelle. This is a award to a business owner with a lease. And so have you looked at the lease as far as how long a term a lease it is, what type of options they have, if, as far as a landowner, kicking them out early, things like that, to make sure that the investment we're doing here is going to pay off in 13 years?
Yes. So it's a very long-term lease, but the improvements that the TIF has decided to make into this property are the electrical upgrades and the sidewalk for the city repair, and then just lighting and security on the outside of the building. So even if this business for some reason does not work out, the TIF investment into the property are stuff that's bettering the whole community in the district and that block and whoever would come into that building next. That's why we paid particular interest to those asks, so that they would be in the long term successful for the building and the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. This doesn't require public hearing. So I move to conditionally approve tax increment financing assistance from the eBird Tax Increment Finance District Funds to 1889 Brewing Company, LLC for redevelopment costs up to a maximum reimbursement of $40,837.16 as recommended by the Bird Board.
Second. Second by Councilmember Gillick. Very good. Would either of you like to speak to your motion or second?
I'll speak to it quickly just to say it really is very exciting to see the progress that's happening in this neighborhood. I really like seeing the map of the new businesses that have come in. And so I share your excitement in this area, revitalizing it. And thank you for your investment in you're putting up a lot of private equity to do this. So I wish you all the very best.
Very good. Councilor Gillick?
Yeah, I guess I'd also add my appreciation for, being a pioneer in the area. Not the only, that's great. You can be part of a community, and that's a great entrepreneurial spirit. So I appreciate that and the activity you're going to bring, and to the Bird staff and board for bringing this forward as well, supporting your efforts.
Very good. Any other discussion on the motion? Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we need to, when we look at businesses that are going to help the community, I think this is going to bring activity down the eBird. It'll bring some tax dollars in, but I think when we look at the type of industry we want in the city, we want to look at what it's doing to our whole community. And I think that we have to realize that, and this is based on the 23 community health needs assessment, that 23.2% of the area adults are excessive drinkers, heavy drinkers, binge drinkers, and that's affecting 43% of our community that is saying it's negatively impacted by substance abuse. And so I would hope that while this business is going to probably pass tonight and it's going to be developed and it's going to be operating, you're going to have a lot of people on the streets, and that you understand what the impact of your industry is having on our community, because we have a lot of people who are in the shadows and suffering and causing things that eventually lead to further public safety issues and stuff like that down the road. So I would encourage you as your industry to look in ways to impact the community outside of your current organization. I've said this the last time to the last TIF applicant we had here, and I think it is something that we as a community need to really work and focus on, is more of this problem with our community that's kind of hidden and underneath the ground. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just comment that this is why we have TIF. If we hadn't had the investment in lighting in the eBird, in fixing drainage problems farther to the east, to money that's gone into Red Ox and other of the neighborhood properties, we wouldn't see this one. But it's part of this beneficial rising tide that lifts all boats, and this is just an example of why TIF works. So thank you. Go forth and prosper. Any other discussion on the motion before we vote? Okay, motion is for approval. Item number 7 is recommended by staff. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes, with exception of Councilmember Bernice voting in opposition. Motion passes 10-1. Thank you very much. That concludes that item. Next item up is public comment on anything not on our agenda. Is there any comment on something that was not on our agenda tonight? Okay, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Harkins again. I just want to let everyone know that we break the ground on the dog park tomorrow and have that completed. And then as soon as that's done, we'll move on to the disc golf course for North Park. So just wanted to let everyone know that that's occurring. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Williams?
Again, my name is Daniel Williams, 817 North 19th Street. I appreciate that it's late in the evening and we all want to go home, so I'll make it really brief. Know that there's a lot of story behind this. Recently, one of my vehicles was lit on fire on the street. And as a result, I had to pick and choose which one of my cars, mine, my wife's, my child's car, ends up being parked on the street. And in replacing the vehicle that was lit on fire, we purchased a new vehicle, and as you are surely aware, you get a 40-day sticker that you put on the back of that vehicle. I did so. My son has this really weird habit of backing his car into the driveway, and so from the front with a 40-day sticker, it looks like it's an unlicensed vehicle. That precipitated into city code enforcement, and this is really why I'm here. I don't really know what to do about this. They wrote me not one but 3 different citations for having my own vehicles parked in my own driveway, saying that they were unlicensed and inoperable. They used 2 different codes. One is 271307 and the other one is 18303, to essentially say that you are not allowed to have a brand new unlicensed vehicle. You are not allowed to have an inoperable vehicle. I don't really know what to do about it. We took it to court. The judge essentially dismissed it mostly on technicality issues. At the time we went to court, another one of my vehicles had just coincidentally broken down. I was in the middle of repairing it, changing a clutch master cylinder, which is not a long, hard thing to do. but I just really don't know what to do about that. And so I would like to see if there's some way that we can have a discussion to clarify to code enforcement that you are indeed allowed to buy a brand new vehicle. You are indeed allowed to have an unlicensed vehicle on your own property. I can't stress that enough. It was completely parked on my own property, and they wrote me a ticket because my license plate was expired. The truck never left my property because it had an expired license plate. I was following the law and storing that vehicle on my own property. I have taken this to code enforcement. I've spoken with Chris Kukleski about it, Tina Hoger, Clayton Gundensman, Justin Anderson, and Marshall Gallunt. This is not my first go around trying to resolve this issue. And if you guys have any suggestions as to how I can effectively deal with this so that I can own my own property on my own property, I am all ears.
Mr. Williams, we'll ask for a report from staff to get their side of the story. My understanding is you're saying that your licensed vehicle was fully operable. Is that correct?
Correct. Right after they wrote me the citation, so I had gone to their office in an attempt to resolve whatever this issue was. Their response was, instead of telling me that my son's car didn't run, they decided my truck didn't have a license plate and they wrote me a ticket for an inoperable vehicle. I immediately went home, and within 6 or 7 minutes of the citation being written, I have a video of my truck running. Like there's nothing wrong with it. I get in it, turn the key, fires right up. Really, this is, and I have since licensed the vehicle. It's honestly not worth the hassle of being told that I can't have and maintain my own property the way that I think is appropriate. And so I went through the extraordinary expense between that and my RV that also was parked on my own property. I spent a little over $500 in licensing fees that I probably will, I shudder to think I will ever get the use out of that. But at any rate, I did do that. And I think the real issue here is that they're continuing to do this. And I think that the Article 27 is a building code. It's a code that requires you to have 2 off-street parking spaces. And it says what is allowed, but it doesn't say what's not allowed. And they read it as if it's not explicitly allowed, that means it's not allowed.
Okay, what would you send us an email with your contact information? There's a couple different vehicles being involved here, and I'm not sure I understand it.
It gets very confusing very fast.
Send us an email if you would, maybe kind of repeat some of the key facts there, and then we have something to forward on and just ask for an explanation. So we appreciate you bringing it to our attention, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. There's nobody else present with us to make public comments, so we'll close the public comment period. Council initiatives, Councilmember Boyette.
Not an initiative, but I forgot to say this. This is important, I think. One of my relatives came from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and wanted to see the Rems in the river. Also, 1426 Wicks. And I said, what in the world is 1426 Wicks? It turned out to be one of the Dirty Dozen houses. It made national news, so we had to go show them how beautiful this property is. So I have to give code enforcement the kudos. Wow, what a job they did. So the other thing is what we do here does affect people. People do see what we do, and this was a big win.
Very good. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Stay.